the ice and fire demon god of Hogwarts. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 176, What People Think Is the Truth. So that's how it is. Irina smiled. If Peter Pettigrew's body functions were constantly consumed by the alchemical cage during this year, then by the end of the school year, he might not be able to escape like in the original book. Lin said lightly, although I don't like the marauders in the original book, I hate traitors. At this time, the group had arrived at the Leaky Cauldron. In the Leaky Cauldron, Mr. Weasley was sitting at the bar and reading the Daily Prophet in his hand. Harry, are you okay? Seeing Harry coming, Mr. Weasley greeted him with a smile. Harry nodded and said, very good, thank you. Harry, Ron and Hermione took their shopping and sat next to Mr. Weasley. Mr. Weasley put down the newspaper and Harry saw the photo of Sirius Black, whom he had seen many times, staring at him. Harry asked, hasn't the Ministry of Magic caught him yet? No, Mr. Weasley said sternly, the Ministry has transferred all of us from our normal posts and tried our best to catch him, but there has been no progress so far. While several people were discussing about Sirius Black, Lin and Irina had gone upstairs to check the room they would stay in tonight. After all, for them who were already familiar with the plot, the story of Sirius was not unusual. Downstairs, Mrs. Weasley walked into the Leaky Cauldron carrying a lot of bags, and the Weasley twins, Percy and Ginny, followed behind her. Dinner time soon arrived. Old Tom, the owner of the Leaky Cauldron, put 3 tables together in the hall. Lin, Irina, Harry, Hermione and the Weasley family of 7 were enjoying 7 or 8 delicious dishes with relish. After dinner, everyone returned to their rooms to prepare for bed. However, when Harry was about to go to bed, a fierce quarrel came from outside. When Harry opened the door, he heard Percy yelling that his student union president badge was missing, and Ron was talking about his missing rat tonic. In order to stop the two from arguing, Harry decided to go downstairs to look for the rat tonic that might have been lost on the bar. But things always come up one after another. Just as Harry reached the stairs and had no time to go downstairs, he heard an argument coming from another single room not far away. This time, the two parties in the argument were Mr. Weasley and Mrs. Weasley, and their argument actually mentioned Harry. This made Harry perk up and eavesdrop on the conversation between the two. In the single room, Mr. Weasley said emotionally, we should tell Harry about this. He has the right to know about it. I wanted to persuade Fudge, but he insisted on treating Harry as a child. Harry is already 13 years old. Arthur, the truth will scare him. Mrs. Weasley screamed, the danger exists at any time. Do you really want Harry to go back to school with such a shadow in his heart? For God's sake, he will be happier if he is kept in the dark. Mr. Weasley retorted harshly, I don't want to make him sad. I just want him to be more vigilant. You know what kind of people Harry and Ron are. They often wander around by themselves and even run into the Forbidden Forest. Harry must not do this again this semester. I can't imagine what danger he would encounter when he escaped from home that night. If the night bus hadn't picked him up, I'm sure he would have died before the Ministry found him. Mr. Weasley said firmly. But he's not dead. He's fine. What's the need? Mrs. Weasley still wanted to argue. Mr. Weasley interrupted her and said in a deep voice, Molly, they say Black is crazy. Maybe he is crazy, but he actually has the ability to escape from Azkaban, which everyone thinks is impossible. It has been a month now, and no one has seen his shadow. I don't care what Fudge says to the Daily Prophet every day. Anyway, we have made no progress in arresting Black. There is only one thing we can be sure of, Black is looking for Harry. Mr. Weasley said so. Mrs. Weasley said, but Harry is absolutely safe in Hogwarts. Mr. Weasley sneered and said, we thought Azkaban was absolutely safe. Since Black can escape from Azkaban, he must have the ability to break into Hogwarts. At the stairs, Harry listened to the argument between the two. From the argument between the two, Harry understood the truth of the matter, the truth that people thought. While Harry was eavesdropping on the argument between the Weasleys, Lin was doing alchemy in her room. Since it was decided to refine an alchemical cage to weaken Peter Pettigrew, the sooner the better. The sooner Banban was locked in the alchemical cage, the less likely Peter Pettigrew would be able to escape at the end of the school year. Lin En waved his wand, and a ball of red flame appeared in front of him. He threw a piece of bronze into the flame, and under Lin En's control, the bronze block turned into the shape of a metal cage. The alchemical cage that Lin En and Irina talked about during the day was not difficult to refine, and its original embryo did not require very complex materials. Bronze alone was enough for the cage to carry all the alchemical arrays that would be engraved on its surface. After using the flame to refine the bronze block into the shape of a cage, Lin En extinguished the flame in front of him and then took out his mithril carving knife. Since Lin En obtained the Philosopher's Stone and made the demon god's authority, Lin En has hardly used the mithril carving knife to engrave the alchemical array. Refining arrays out of thin air has become Lin En's habit of alchemy. But now, Lin En has returned the Philosopher's Stone to Nicholas Flamel. Without the magic supply provided by the Philosopher's Stone, Lin En's own magic reserves are not enough to complete the refining of the array out of thin air, so he can only go back to his old job and use the mithril knife to do alchemy. However, he is not only able to use the mithril knife to do alchemy this school year. The power of the demon god can carry more than just the Philosopher's Stone. Ordinary magic crystals can also provide magic power to Lin En through the power of the demon god. Therefore, after Lin En has refined enough magic crystals, he can use magic crystals to temporarily replace the Philosopher's Stone and use the magic power provided by the magic crystals to complete the refining of the array out of thin air. Of course, the magic crystal is far inferior to the Philosopher's Stone in terms of durability and magic reserves, let alone letting the power of the demon god run at full power. Even if Lin En maintains 3 alchemical arrays at the same time to fight, ordinary magic crystals may not last for more than 10 minutes. Please reward and monthly tickets. Chapter 177 Lin En as one of us. However, with the previous foundation, Lin En still swung the mithril carving knife to engrave the alchemy array very quickly. He flipped his right hand holding the mithril carving knife up and down, and golden rays of light appeared on the surface of the alchemy cage, interweaving into alchemy arrays with strange patterns. Soon, dozens of different alchemy arrays appeared on the alchemy cage. Most of these alchemy arrays were alchemy arrays with negative effects, such as alchemy arrays with attributes such as suppression, magic prohibition, weakness, disintegration, aging and soul wear as the main attributes. As for the positive attribute that Lin En promised to Ron to protect Banban and make him obedient, it was just the simplest defensive alchemy array. Even the alchemy array that played the role of making him obedient was the negative alchemy array with soul wear as the main attribute. After all, soul wear will cause people's energy to be constantly consumed and exhausted, and the exhausted Banban will naturally be so obedient that he is unwilling to move even for a moment. This makes sense, isn't it? Exclamation mark. It can be said that only one of these dozens of alchemical arrays is used to protect Banban from Crookshank's attack, and the remaining alchemical arrays are all used to suppress and disintegrate Banban's body functions, making him weaker. After the last alchemical array was refined, Lin En put down the mithril carving knife in his hand and raised his wand. Obscure syllables came out of Lin En's mouth, and the wand lightly touched the top of the alchemical cage. With a flash of golden light, the alchemical arrays originally engraved on the surface of the alchemical cage were immersed in the alchemical cage, and outsiders could not see it. After completing this step, the alchemical cage that Lin En specially customized for Peter Pettigrew was completely completed. After completing the production of the alchemical cage, Lin En put away the tools and went to bed to rest. The next morning, when Lin En and Irina walked out of their respective rooms, they saw Harry, who was worried, and Ron, who was angry, after being scolded by Percy for angering him. "Ron, I've made your alchemy cage for you." Lin En held up the alchemy cage he had made last night, and said to Ron. Hearing this, Ron's depression was thrown out of his mind at once. He ran over happily, and took the alchemy cage from Lin En's hand. Ron thanked Lin En. "Thank you, Senior Luo." Ron took Banban out of his pocket and tried to put it into the alchemy cage. However, when Banban approached the alchemy cage, he seemed to find something wrong. He could feel a magical fluctuation that frightened him from this strange cage. And that kind of magical fluctuation, he had only felt it in black magic before. Ban's eyes widened. His eyes became terrified. He screamed, struggled to break free from Ron's hand, and wanted to escape from this place. However, before he could jump off the table, a big hand pressed him down on the table. Scabbers looked up and saw Lin looking at him with a kind look and a gentle smile. Scabbers felt as if his throat was clamped by the scythe of the god of death. The cold gaze made him feel like he was falling into an ice cellar. Try not to let it out. Just put it in the cage for feeding. Lin stuffed Scabbers into the alchemy cage, closed the door of the alchemy cage, and then said to Ron beside him. Ron nodded like pounding garlic, and he promised again and again, "Okay, senior. Even if it's for its health and safety, I won't let it out. I won't let that stinky cat hurt my Scabbers." Hearing this, Hermione glared at him. "What stinky cat? It's my Crookshanks, a very gentle cat. Isn't it, Crookshanks?" As she said that, Hermione rubbed Crookshanks' belly with her side face. Crookshanks meowed softly and echoed Hermione. But Crookshanks' eyes were fixed on Scabbers, who was trapped in the alchemical cage, as if he wanted to kill him with his claws. However, the terrifying magical fluctuations from the alchemical cage made this fat cat, who was a hybrid of a cat and a Neanderthal, and was naturally sensitive to magic, a little timid. At this time, Mr. Wheel-Eye poked his head in from the door of the leaky cauldron and said to everyone, "They are coming. Let's go, let's go." Mr. Wheel-Eye led everyone to stride across a short sidewalk and walk towards the first car parked across the sidewalk. These were two old-fashioned dark green cars, and the drivers of the cars were all mysterious wizards wearing bright green velvet suits. Obviously, the drivers of these two cars were auras from the Ministry of Magic, and they were naturally ordered by the Ministry of Magic to come to protect Harry, the little wizard with the name of the Savior, from being harmed by the notorious Azkaban fugitive Sirius Black. The group took the special car of the Ministry of Magic auras and soon arrived at King's Cross Station. Everyone passed through the partition and boarded the Hogwarts Express. However, Harry did not get on the train with everyone else. Instead, he whispered something with Mr. Wheel-Eye on the platform. As time passed, the Hogwarts Express was about to leave. Harry barely boarded the train just before the train started. "I need to talk to you alone." Walking into the aisle of the train, Harry whispered to Ron, Hermione and Irina, while the Hogwarts Express was gradually accelerating. Hearing Harry's words, Ron looked at his sister Ginny and said, "Ginny, go away." "Okay, no problem." Ginny was angry. She didn't want to say a word to this annoying brother. She left the aisle angrily. At this time, there were only 5 people left in the aisle: Harry, Ron, Hermione, Irina and Lin. Harry walked along the aisle, trying to find an empty carriage, but on the way forward, his eyes swept to Lin from time to time. Seeing this, Irina held Lin and said to Harry, "Don't worry, Harry, Lin is one of us." Ron, who had just received Lin's favor, also stood on Irina's side. He nodded and said, "Yes, although Senior is a Slytherin, he is definitely a good person. We don't need to avoid him." Hermione didn't say anything, but her attitude was obviously inclined to Irina's side. Seeing that his companions all felt this way, Harry had no choice but to nod and lead the 4 of them to the carriage at the end of the train. This carriage was the only one in the Hogwarts Express that was not full of people. There was only one middle-aged man in this carriage, who was sleeping soundly on the seat next to the bed. This middle-aged man was wearing a tattered wizard robe with several patches on the robe. He looked sick and had no strength at all. Although he looked very young, his light brown hair had already turned a little grey. Chapter 178 Dementors. On the luggage rack above the middle-aged man's head, a tattered small box tied with many ropes was printed with the name of the middle-aged man, R.J. Lupin. "Is this our new professor this year? I don't know which course he teaches." Ron looked at Professor Lupin, who was sleeping by the window, with some doubts and said. Irina spread her hands and said, "Obviously, among the new professors known now, we already know that the professor of care of magical creatures is Hagrid, and the only vacant course left is defense against the dark arts." Ron looked at Professor Lupin suspiciously. He doubted whether this professor who looked weak could be competent for the job of teaching defense against the dark arts. At this time, Harry sat down on one side of the carriage. He looked at the sleeping Professor Lupin, and then whispered to the others about the conversation he had just had with Mr. Wheel-Eye outside the Hogwarts Express. After listening to Harry's story, Hermione looked very incredible. She said in surprise, "You said Sirius Black escaped from Azkaban to find you? Harry, you must be careful, and don't give Black the chance to catch you alone." Harry nodded helplessly and said, "Of course I will pay attention, but I don't understand why Mr. Weasley thinks I will go looking for someone who wants to kill me." On the side, Lin said lightly, "Maybe you have some reason to find him." Harry was stunned. He didn't understand what Lin meant. "Isn't Sirius Black a Death Eater who once served Voldemort?" Exclamation mark. "What reason can I have to find him?" Irina said softly, "I think the truth of the matter needs to wait for you to discover it yourself. However, as long as you follow Lin and me closely, even if Sirius Black really comes, we are sure to protect your safety. In fact, let alone Lin and Irina, even if Harry faces Sirius alone, there will be no danger. After all, his real identity is Harry's godfather." Hearing Irina's words, Harry nodded gratefully to Irina and Lin. After discussing Sirius's affairs, everyone began to chat casually. Hermione carried Crookshanks out and let Crookshanks move freely in the carriage. Crookshanks did not run around, but squatted on the table in the carriage, staring at Scabbers, who was placed in the alchemical cage. With the alchemical cage made by Lin, although Ron still hated Crookshanks, the fat cat, he did not express his dissatisfaction with Hermione directly like in the original book. As time passed, the sky gradually darkened. It was 4 or 5 in the afternoon, and the Hogwarts Express also drove into a foggy area. There was fine rain around, which wet the windows of the Hogwarts Express. Not long after, the Hogwarts Express gradually began to slow down. "Are we there?" Ron stood up and looked out the window of the thick fog and said. Lin En pulled out his wand with a serious look on his face. "I think we haven't arrived, but there are uninvited guests." At this time, it was already pitch black outside the window. The Hogwarts Express slowly stopped, and the sound of the wheels could no longer be heard, while the sound of wind and rain outside the window hit the window louder than before. Click. The sound of a gear stalling sounded, and in the distance there was a ping-pong sound, as if many pieces of luggage fell from the luggage rack. Then, all the lights in the Hogwarts Express went out, and the entire train fell into darkness. In the darkness, a piercing sound came, as if a wooden thorn was scratching the glass, giving people goosebumps. "It seems that something is moving outside." Ron tried to look out the window. "It seems that someone is getting on the train." Hearing this, Irina also showed a serious look, and she pulled out her wand. In the darkness, the young wizards on the Hogwarts Express fell into panic. Many young wizards walked around in the carriages. Some knocked others down in the darkness. Apologies, questions, and curses continued to ring in the train. "Quiet." At this moment, a hoarse voice suddenly sounded. Professor Lupin, who had been sleeping by the window, finally woke up. He gently waved the wand in his hand. There was a slight crackle and a faint flame lit up from the top of Professor Lupin's wand. The faint flame illuminated his tired face, but his eyes were very alert. Just as Professor Lupin stood up and prepared to check what happened in the Hogwarts Express, the sliding door of the carriage slowly opened. A tall and large figure in a cloak appeared at the door of the carriage. Its face was completely hidden under the black hood, and a grey and gloomy hand stretched out from under its cloak. This hand didn't look like a human hand at all. It was as thin as a bone, giving people a chilling feeling. The strange hand seemed to be covered with mucus and spots, like something that had rotted in the water after death. There was no doubt that the creature that appeared at the door of the carriage was the Dementor that was supposed to be guarding Azkaban prison. The Dementor seemed to be aware of everyone's gaze. It slowly took a deep breath. Several people felt a piercing chill sweeping over them, as if the chill was going to penetrate their skin and pierce their hearts. Not far away, Harry felt that his 7 emotions and 6 desires were being sucked away by this strange power. He seemed to no longer feel happy. The next moment, Harry rolled his eyes and fainted backwards. Ah! Seeing Harry fall, Ron and Hermione rushed over and supported Harry's body. Lin and Irina looked at the Dementor at the door of the carriage vigilantly, and they waved their wands almost at the same time. Expecto Patronus! Expecto Patronus! Lin En and Irina shouted together. As the silver white light bloomed in the carriage, the endless silver light illuminated every corner of the carriage. Even the little wizards outside the corridor felt blinded when they saw the dazzling silver white light. Then, a silver wolf shining with silver white light and a silver fox also shining with silver white light appeared in the carriage. They pounced on the Dementors at the door of the carriage in tacit understanding. These two physical patronuses carried endless joy and bombarded the Dementors with the force of thunder. Please give me rewards and monthly tickets. Chapter 179 Worthy of being his child. Feeling the approach of the two physical patronuses, the Dementors let out a shrill scream and quickly retreated with their cloaks. Lin and Irina waved their wands again, and the silver wolf and silver fox chased the Dementor relentlessly, actually dispersing a lot of the black magic around the Dementor. Of course, there were more than one Dementors in the Hogwarts Express, but whenever Lin and Irina's patronus approached a carriage, the Dementors in that carriage would flee as fast as if they had seen a ghost, leaving the Hogwarts Express. In less than a minute, dozens of Dementors were driven out of the Hogwarts Express by Lin and Irina's spells. Dozens of Dementors were defeated by two underage wizards. This seemed incredible, but it was not surprising. After all, at the end of the middle school year in the original book, Harry, who was at the Black Lake, only released a physical patronus that was enough to drive away dozens of Dementors with his own strength, not to mention Lin and Irina, whose magic level and emotions were even stronger! Exclamation mark. Endless silver white light burst out from the windows of each carriage, illuminating the fog outside the Hogwarts Express. Countless Dementors fled the train with ghosts and wolves howling, as if they were escaping from the punishment of God. Outside the train, the dazzling silver light like daylight illuminated the entire small valley where the train was located. The silver white light filled with countless happy emotions made the little wizards in the train smile happily involuntarily. In the carriage, Professor Lupin looked at Lin and Irina in surprise. After seeing his friend's child Harry fainted, he planned to cast the Patronus charm to drive away the Dementors, but before he waved his wand, these two little wizards who looked only in the 3rd or 4th grade actually released the complete Patronus charm. How could he not be surprised? Exclamation mark. You know, even among the elite aurors of the Ministry of Magic, there are only a handful who can cast a complete Patronus charm. Did you learn the Patronus charm at Hogwarts? Professor Lupin said with some difficulty. It was hard for him to imagine that the two little wizards in front of him could cast a better Patronus charm than himself. Lin shook his head and said, "No, my teacher taught me." Irina said, "Lin taught me." Professor Lupin's eyes swept back and forth between Lin and Irina, and finally fell on Lin. "My classmate. What is your name?" Lin answered simply, "Lin Rowell, Professor." Hearing this, Professor Lupin suddenly realized. Rowell, is it Henry's child? I didn't expect that he has grown up so big, and he is so outstanding. Professor Lupin looked at Lin with admiration and asked, "Lin, can you tell me who your teacher is?" Lin said, "My teacher is Wallace & Green. You should have heard of him, the famous French alchemist who invented the Forbidden Stone." Professor Lupin nodded slightly. He had naturally heard of Wallace & Green, the famous French alchemist who invented the Forbidden Stone. Although the Forbidden Stone that was made public had very low power and could only slightly weaken the magic power of wizards, Wallace & Green's Forbidden Stone was the first to open up the concept of forbidden magic in the magic world. If other alchemists in the future develop a more powerful Forbidden Stone that can completely seal the magic power of wizards, then as the first proposer of the concept of forbidden magic, Wallace & Green will become the ancestor of forbidden magic alchemy. Just as Professor Lupin wanted to continue to say something, a groan came from not far away. Harry groaned and woke up, and Ron and Hermione supported his body. "Eat some, it will help." Seeing Harry wake up, Professor Lupin came over quickly, broke off a large piece of chocolate, and handed it to Harry. Harry took the chocolate weakly and thanked him. "Thank you, Professor Lupin." Harry ate the chocolate in small bites. His face turned a little red, and he stood up. "What on earth is that thing?" Harry asked in confusion. Professor Lupin wanted to clear Harry's confusion, but Irina spoke out before he could. "Dementors. Dementors from Azkaban. It is an evil man-made creature, the guardian of Azkaban prison, almost impossible to be eliminated, and the only thing that can restrain it is the Patronus charm." Harry was even more confused. But why did the Dementors from Azkaban come to our Hogwarts Express? Lin put his wand away again and sneered. "Why? There are only two possibilities for the Dementors to leave Azkaban. The first is that the Dementors rioted and escaped from the control of the Ministry of Magic, and the second is that some of the Ministry of Magic's good-for-nothings ignored the lives of us little wizards in order to capture the fugitive Sirius Black to stabilize the people's hearts and support rate. Hearing Lin's words, everyone was silent. Although Lin didn't say it clearly, they all knew that there was only one final truth, which was the latter of the two possibilities Lin said. Senior all, the good-for-nothing in the Ministry of Magic you mentioned, could it be? Harry asked with some difficulty. He could not imagine that the Minister of Magic who had just tried to save him would do such a hateful thing. Lin sneered and said lightly, Harry, you have to know that not all people who are good to you are good people. That's right, the rubbish who deserves to go to hell is the current Minister of Magic, Cornelius Fudge. In order to maintain his popularity and support rate, he will use his power as the Minister of Magic to get you out. Naturally, in order to maintain his popularity and support rate, he will also let all of us die. Lin's words made everyone silent. Lin's words made them unable to refute at all. After all, the Dementors invaded the train that the little wizards took to school right in front of them. Professor Lupin also looked silently in the direction of Lin. He did not expect that Lin was just a little wizard in the 4th grade, but he could see the intrigues of the Ministry of Magic so clearly. You know, if Lin hadn't completely exposed Fudge's thoughts, even Professor Lupin would probably have simply thought that the Ministry of Magic had released the Dementors because of poor supervision, or that the Ministry of Magic had made a wrong choice, resulting in bad consequences, and would not have thought more deeply. It's worthy of being Henry's child. Professor Lupin murmured in a low voice, as if he was recalling the time more than a decade ago. Henry Rowell was an extremely good wizard back then, otherwise he would not have been the only undercover agent of the Order of the Phoenix, sneaking around Voldemort for so many years, and even developing into Voldemort's right-hand man. Chapter 180 Harry's Stubbornness and Dumbledore's Old Habits. Even Severus Snape, who later stayed with Voldemort as an undercover agent in the original book, was originally a pure Death Eater. After Voldemort killed his White Moonlight, Lily Evans, he changed his position and stood firmly on the side of protecting Harry. It can be seen that it is a rare thing for Henry Rowe, a member of the Order of the Phoenix who has been lurking beside Voldemort, a master of legilimency, from beginning to end, to be able to send back so much useful information for many years. As Henry's child, this little wizard named Lin Rao is also excellent. Professor Lupin sighed, and his eyes softened. After Harry almost recovered, Professor Lupin left the carriage and prepared to go to the front of the train to talk to the driver. Shortly after Professor Lupin left, the train started slowly and arrived at Hogsmeade Station smoothly in the evening. However, when everyone arrived at the outskirts of Hogwarts Castle in a carriage, pulled by the Thestrals, they found two eerie Dementors distributed beside the stone pillars on both sides of the wrought iron gate outside the Hogwarts Castle. Just approaching the two Dementors, Harry felt a wave of cold coming towards him. Harry shrank back into the carriage and waited until the carriage passed through the middle gate before he poked his head out again. Soon, the carriage stopped outside the castle gate. The young wizards got off the carriage one after another, walked through the castle gate and headed towards the auditorium. When entering the auditorium, Lin and Irina subconsciously looked up at the ceiling of the auditorium. At this time, the ceiling was a sky covered with dark clouds. Sure enough, there are uninvited guests. Roll, Lowell, Potter, Granger. I want to see the four of you. At this moment, Professor McGonagall's voice suddenly came from behind them. The four turned around and saw Professor McGonagall with a serious look on her face, waving to them. Lin and Irina walked towards Professor McGonagall calmly, while Harry and Hermione were very nervous. No need to be so nervous, come with me. As if noticing the tense faces of Harry and Hermione, Professor McGonagall forced a smile and said to the two. Hearing this, Harry and Hermione's tense expressions finally relaxed. The four followed Professor McGonagall through the hallway, walked up the marble stairs, and finally came to her small office along a corridor. Professor McGonagall's office was not big, but it exuded a warm atmosphere all the time. The warm fire was burning in the fireplace, and the furnishings in the office also made people feel warm. Professor Lupin sent an owl to tell me that you have released the complete Patronus charm. Is this true? Professor McGonagall looked at Lin and Irina and asked. Lin and Irina nodded at the same time. Seeing this, Professor McGonagall's eyes flashed with joy. She was very happy that her students could master the Patronus Charm, a spell with a very high coefficient of difficulty that could only be cast by positive white wizards. She was proud of Lin and Irina. Very good, very good. If this school year had not started yet, I would probably give Gryffindor and Slytherin 50 points each. After all, you saved your classmates. Professor McGonagall smiled softly and said to the two. Lin and Irina looked at each other and thanked Professor McGonagall at the same time. Thank you for the compliment, Professor. After praising Lin and Irina, Professor McGonagall's expression became serious again. She said to Harry, Professor Lupin also told me that you were not feeling well on the train, Potter. Hearing this, Harry felt a little awkward. He didn't want outsiders to know that he fainted on the train. After all, no one else fainted, but he did, which made Harry feel very embarrassed. I'm fine, Harry said stubbornly. I don't need anything. At this moment, there was a knock on the door, and Madame Pomfrey from the school hospital came over. She asked Professor McGonagall about what happened to Harry, and after learning that it was the Dementors who did it, her eyes became as solemn as Professor McGonagall's. Madame Pomfrey said dissatisfiedly, what on earth is the Ministry of Magic doing? They actually sent Dementors around the school. I don't think he would be the first person to faint. He is cold and wet. They are really scary guys. The impact they have on those who are already very fragile. Madame Pomfrey examined Harry's body. She muttered, but was interrupted by Harry. Harry said angrily, no, I'm not fragile. No matter how Professor McGonagall and Madame Pomfrey asked, Harry kept saying that he was fine. Of course, after eating the chocolate given to him by Professor Lupin, his body did feel much better, so Professor McGonagall and Madame Pomfrey finally let Harry, Lin and Irina leave, leaving Hermione alone. Lin and Irina naturally knew that Professor McGonagall was going to give the time converter she applied for from the Ministry of Magic to Hermione, who had selected all the courses, and the three returned to the hall. Just as Lin and Irina guessed, when Hermione came out of Professor McGonagall's office with a happy face, a clock-shaped pendant appeared on her neck. The hall for the opening dinner was a sea of pointed wizard hats. Thousands of candles floated above the 4 long tables where the little wizards from the 4 major colleges were sitting, and these candles made the little wizards' faces sparkle. At the other end of the hall, Professor Flitwick was holding the sorting hat and preparing to leave the hall. Obviously, they did not catch up with the sorting ceremony, hosted by Professor Flitwick this year. At this time, Professor McGonagall, who had already entered the hall, was striding towards her seat in the teacher's seat, while Lin and the other 3 returned to their respective seats. Not long after, Dumbledore, who was in the center of the teacher's seat, stood up and spoke. Welcome back to Hogwarts. I have a few things to tell you all, one of which is very important. So I think it's best to make it clear before you enjoy your delicious meal and your brains become confused. Dumbledore said loudly to everyone. Hearing Dumbledore's words, all the little wizards sat up straight. You know, Dumbledore almost never talked loudly before the opening dinner. He never liked those red tapes, but was willing to let the little wizards eat earlier and enjoy the food of the opening dinner. But now, Dumbledore has changed his habit. Obviously, this means that what he is about to talk about is indeed very important. Please give rewards and monthly tickets. Chapter 181, Somewhat Enjoyable. Dumbledore cleared his throat and said, our school has welcomed several Dementors from Azkaban. They are sent by the Ministry of Magic to perform official duties. I believe you all know this, because they have searched the Hogwarts Express. Dumbledore paused, and a hint of displeasure flashed in his azure eyes. Obviously, Dumbledore was very dissatisfied with the Ministry of Magic's unauthorized dispatch of Dementors, such highly threatening creatures, to search the train and endanger the lives of his students. They are stationed at every entrance of the school, Dumbledore said lightly. I must make it clear that no one is allowed to leave the school without permission when they are here. No tricks, gimmicks, or disguises can fool Dementors, even the invisibility cloak. Dumbledore meant that Harry was probably the only little wizard who had an invisibility cloak in Hogwarts Castle, and most of the other little wizards who wanted to gain the ability to be invisible chose to learn the disillusionment charm. The nature of Dementors does not understand excuses or pleas for mercy. Therefore, I remind everyone here not to give them any reason to hurt you. I hope that the prefects and our newly elected male and female student union presidents can ensure that no student will come into conflict with Dementors. Dumbledore said seriously, looking around at the young wizards below. The young wizards from the 4 major colleges all sat upright and looked at him, their faces full of solemnity. Previously on the Hogwarts Express, they felt as if their happiness was being sucked away just by being close to the Dementors, and they felt like they wanted to become depressed and commit suicide, not to mention becoming the target of the Dementors! Without Dumbledore's words, they did not dare to violate school rules and sneak out of the castle without permission when there were Dementors stationed at Hogwarts Castle. Let's change to a happier topic. Dumbledore's expression finally softened after discussing the topic of Dementors. I'm very pleased to welcome 2 new professors to join our faculty this semester. First, Professor Lupin, who has gladly agreed to fill the vacancy in the Defense Against the Dark Arts class. Dumbledore looked in the direction of Professor Lupin, who stood up and nodded to everyone. There were a few cold, sparse applause in the hall. The young wizards were not impressed by the ragged-looking Professor Lupin. Only Harry and others, who had received a favor from Professor Lupin and received chocolates from him, clapped enthusiastically. Judging from Professor Lupin's clothes, the young wizards did not think that he could be a good professor of defense against the dark arts. Even Harry and others who were clapping hard. After all, this time with Lin and Irina's patroness, Professor Lupin was not able to show himself in front of Harry and others and use the patroness charm to drive away the Dementors. However, Lin and Irina, who had been in the limelight before, were clapping in the audience. Others did not know, but they knew. Among the 7 Defense Against the Dark Arts professors after Harry entered school, I'm afraid that only Professor Lupin and Professor Snape could be said to be competent. Otherwise, take a look at what the other Defense Against the Dark Arts professors are like, with Voldemort's garlic head on the back of their heads, swaggering bandits, imposter Death Eaters, pink toads and real Death Eaters. Look at Snape. At this time, Ron whispered in Harry's ear. Snape's thin, yellow face showed a twitching expression, and he looked very surprised. Moreover, that expression seemed to be not only surprised and angry, but even hateful. As for our second new professor, Dumbledore continued, I regret to tell you that our care of magical creatures professor, Professor Kettleburn, retired at the end of last semester in order to have more time to enjoy his old arms and legs. However, I'm happy to announce that the person who will fill his position is none other than Rubius Hagrid, who has agreed to accept this teaching position in addition to his duties as gamekeeper. Dumbledore said happily. As Dumbledore's voice fell, applause far warmer than before rang out in the hall. Almost every little lion of Gryffindor was clapping hard, and many applause could be heard from the long tables of other colleges. In the teacher's seat, Hagrid's face flushed red, his eyes lowered to look at his big hands, and a big smile was hidden behind his messy and tangled black beard. After talking about all the important things, Dumbledore also announced that dinner was served. The golden plates and high-footed wine glasses in front of everyone suddenly appeared full of food and drinks, and everyone began to feast on them. Soon, the opening dinner was over, and the young wizards returned to the dormitory to rest under the leadership of the class leaders. The next day, in the morning, after enjoying breakfast, Harry and others walked towards the direction of the divination classroom. However, Lin and Irina had already appeared at the door of the library early at this time. In addition to the required courses, they each only took one elective course. They did not need to run back and forth between classrooms, like Harry and his friends every day. They were very free. For example, in the first class this morning, Lin and Irina had no classes. Lin had no classes this morning, while Irina needed to go to the transfiguration classroom to attend Professor McGonagall's transfiguration class before the second class started. Let's go, put on the disillusionment charm, and go to the restricted books section to find some advanced knowledge of the dark arts. Lin said so. Now, the knowledge of dark magic that Lin and Irina have mastered is obtained from the dark magic books and dark magic materials on the 4th floor of Rowell Castle, but they have not touched the books in the restricted area of the Hogwarts library. You know, the Hogwarts library is known to be all-encompassing. and they will surely be able to get more knowledge of dark magic from it. Irina nodded slightly. She waved her wand lightly, and a silent disillusionment spell was cast on herself, and her figure disappeared on the spot. Lin also cast the disillusionment spell to erase his figure, and he held Irina's little hand to feel Irina's presence. In this way, Lin and Irina held hands, used the disillusionment spell to avoid the library's librarian, Madame Pince, and sneaked into the restricted area of the Hogwarts library. The two leisurely strolled in the dimly lit restricted area. They were also walking together in an invisible state with Lin En holding her hand. For some reason, Irina didn't feel embarrassed like last time. Instead, she seemed to enjoy it. Chapter 182, Soul Imprisoned in a Book. Soon, the two came to a dark bookshelf that seemed to be soaked in ink. They could feel the uncomfortable breath coming from the books on the bookshelf. "Wait for me a moment." Lin En removed the disillusionment spell and said softly. He took out a book of black magic from the bookshelf. He waved his wand and slashed it across the cover of the book like a carving knife, leaving golden threads on it. As early as last night, Lin En used his free time to refine 3 magic crystals and put one of them into the groove of the magic god's power as the source of magic power for Lin En to cast spells. Therefore, with the magic power supply of the magic crystal, although Lin En did not dare to refine the alchemy array out of thin air as he did with the magic stone, he could still use the magic wand instead of the carving knife to refine the alchemy array on the surface of the object. Not long after, several alchemy arrays appeared on the cover of the black magic book, and Irina, who had also removed the disillusionment charm, felt that the uncomfortable breath that had previously emanated from the book had disappeared. This black magic book imprisoned a human soul. It will manifest and attack the wizard when the wizard opens the book. I just used the alchemy array to completely seal the soul in the book. Now you can read it with confidence. Lin En said to Irina with a smile, and handed the black magic book in his hand to Irina. Irina carefully looked at the black magic book in her hand. For some reason, she always felt that the book in her hand was a little familiar. But soon, Irina understood. Isn't this black magic book the one that Harry opened when he sneaked into the restricted book area in his first grade and suddenly made a shrill scream? Exclamation mark. When Harry opened the book, the face that appeared on the page was probably the movement caused by the struggle of the soul imprisoned in it. After learning that this black magic book had been completely sealed by Lin En, Irina opened the book in her hand with confidence. The face and screaming sound that had appeared before did not appear again. Now, what appeared in front of Irina were just some ordinary words and pictures. And these words and pictures recorded the profound black magic knowledge. Of course, compared with the 3 unforgivable curses and the fiery curse that Lin En mastered, these black magic knowledge were not that profound. However, some of the ideas and secret methods of using these black magic knowledge in battle were still worth learning from. It was a pity that they could not stay in this restricted book area for too long. After all, after Harry and the others finished their divination class, Irina had to go to Professor McGonagall's transfiguration class with them. After all, transfiguration was a compulsory course. So, after estimating that the time was almost up, Irina left the restricted book area first and walked towards the direction of the transfiguration classroom. Lin En returned to the dormitory with some alchemical runes, copied from another alchemical book in the forbidden book area, ready to test the effects of these alchemical runes. At this time, in the transfiguration classroom, Irina looked at Harry and the other 2 who looked absent-minded and couldn't help but feel a little confused. "What's wrong with you? Why do you look so hopeless?" Irina asked in confusion. Professor McGonagall on the podium also cast her eyes over. As early as the beginning of the transfiguration class, she noticed the abnormality of Harry and the other 2. You know, when she just talked about the transfiguration knowledge related to animagus, and even when he transformed into a tabby cat in front of the whole class, Harry looked decadent and didn't pay any attention to himself. "Yeah, what happened to you today?" "Actually, it's nothing big, but my transfiguration didn't win the applause of my classmates for the first time." Professor McGonagall slowly walked down from the podium, and she looked at Harry with a kind but stern look. Hermione, who was sitting on Harry's right, raised her hand and explained, "Professor, we just had a divination class and interpreted tea leaves, and the result is..." Before Hermione finished speaking, Professor McGonagall suddenly realized something. She frowned and asked, "No need to say more, Miss Granger. Tell me, who among you will die this year?" Hearing Professor McGonagall's words, Irina also understood what happened to Harry and the others, and she felt relieved. Irina chuckled and said, "I guessed it. Could it be that your divination Professor Trelawney predicted your death, Harry?" Harry nodded depressedly. He didn't understand why his big sister Irina could still laugh when he was predicted to die. "I see." Professor McGonagall stared at Harry with her sparkling eyes and said, "Then you should know, Potter, that Sybil Trelawney has predicted the death of a student every year since she came to this school. But so far, none of them have died. She likes to welcome a new class by looking at the signs of death. If I hadn't said anything bad about my colleagues." Professor McGonagall suddenly stopped, as if she realized that she had been saying bad things about Professor Trelawney. After a pause, Professor McGonagall continued, "Divination is the least rigorous branch of magic. To be honest, I don't have much patience for it. You know, there are very few real prophets, and Professor Trelawney." She paused again, and then said in a matter-of-fact tone, "Mr. Potter, in my opinion, you are in very good health, so please forgive me if I didn't exempt you from your homework today. I promise you that, if you really die, you don't have to hand in your homework." Hearing Professor McGonagall's words, Harry finally felt relieved, and he couldn't help but laugh out loud. This transfiguration class ended very quickly, and after lunch, Irina had Hagrid's Care of Magical Creatures class. As a fan of all kinds of magical creatures, Irina even secretly raised a magical creature with a danger level of XXXXX, the Winged Demon. Naturally, she was looking forward to the next Care of Magical Creatures class. Of course, what she was looking forward to was not only Professor Hagrid's Care of Magical Creatures class, but also the hippogriffs she was about to meet, especially Buckbeak, the hippogriff that appeared many times in the original book. Please give me rewards and monthly tickets. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 183 Hippogriff. This magical creature protection class was taught by the third year Gryffindor and Slytherin students. The little wizards, wearing wizard robes from two different schools, left Hogwarts Castle and walked towards Hagrid's hut. The rain that had fallen all morning had stopped. Irina and the others stepped on the wet lawn, which was soft and elastic, after being moistened by the rain. When Irina and the others arrived outside Hagrid's hut, Hagrid was already wearing his moleskin coat and waiting there with Fang. He looked so excited that he seemed to be eager to set off. Come on, hurry up. I have something good to show you today. This class is wonderful. Follow me," Hagrid said excitedly, and he led the little wizards towards the Forbidden Forest. However, just when the little wizards thought Hagrid was going to take them into the Forbidden Forest, Hagrid stopped outside a small paddock. The small paddock was empty and there was nothing inside. "Everyone gather around this fence and make sure you can see. Okay, first you need to open your textbooks," Hagrid said loudly. Malfoy from the Slytherin camp sneered and said in his lazy voice, "How do I open it?" Hearing this, Hagrid was stunned. Irina from the Gryffindor camp knew that this was Hagrid's first day as a professor, and he was not very good at handling some emergencies. She stepped forward considerately and said to all the students, "Everyone, you need to touch the spine of the Monster Book of Monsters so that the Monster Book of Monsters will calm down." Irina is the most powerful among the third year wizards in Hogwarts. She has also faced Voldemort and killed the basilisk. Her words are trusted by all students of the same grade, including the little snakes in Slytherin. With the help of Irina, the little wizards began to try. Soon, most of the little wizards calmed down the Monster Book of Monsters in their hands. Only some of the more timid little wizards were still looking at the textbooks in their hands timidly, not daring to untie the ropes that bound them. They had seen the violent look of the Monster Book of Monsters when it wanted to bite off their hands. In this regard, Irina was like an older sister, helping them to calm down the textbooks in their hands one by one. After everyone successfully opened their textbooks, Hagrid scratched his head and said, "Since you all have textbooks, then now, what you need now is magical animals." Yes, I'll go and bring them. Wait a minute. Perhaps because Hagrid was a professor at Hogwarts for the first time in his life, he still looked very nervous. He stuttered, and then walked into the Forbidden Forest without looking back and disappeared. "This big guy, don't you want us to have a self-study class in this bare place?" Seeing Hagrid leave, Malfoy sneered. Hearing this, Harry immediately shouted, "Shut up, Malfoy. Oh my god, this school is doomed." Malfoy said loudly, "That idiot is here to teach. My dad will have a heart attack if he hears about it." Seeing Malfoy insulting her friend like this, Irina said coldly, "Then let him have a heart attack and die suddenly." "Malfoy, I think you are itching for trouble." Seeing Irina, who had beaten him before, speak, Malfoy subconsciously shrank his neck. But perhaps because he had not been beaten for more than a year, Malfoy stiffened his neck and said, "Did I say anything wrong? An idiot who can't teach, and a fool who was scared to death by Dementors." Malfoy's ridicule was as effective as ever. Irina and others drew their wands at the same time, wanting to teach Malfoy a lesson. But at this moment, Gryffindor's Lavender Brown pointed across the paddock and exclaimed. Hagrid was seen driving a dozen strange-looking magical animals towards the paddock. These magical animals had the bodies, hind legs and tails of horses, but their front legs, wings, and heads were like those of eagles. Their sharp beaks were silver like steel, and their big eyes were orange. These magical animals were hippogriffs. They all had a thick leather collar around their necks, tied by a long chain, and these long chains were held in Hagrid's hands. In fact, these hippogriffs were not originally put on leather collars. They could fly happily and freely in the Forbidden Forest, but for the safety of the students, Hagrid still put leather collars on them during class. Even in Hagrid's eyes, these hippogriffs were just some cute babies. Well, it's not just Hagrid. In Irina's eyes, hippogriffs are also some cute and ferocious little animals. After all, Irina even raised her XXXXX level hippogriff, so it was natural that she would raise a 30th level hippogriff. Irina looked at the hippogriffs with shining eyes. Their shiny fur gradually changed from feathers to hair. Each hippogriff had a different color, including stormy gray, bronze, pink piebald, sparkling reddish brown and inky black. Okay, Hagrid rubbed his hands and looked at everyone with a smile. If you want to get closer. The little wizards in the Slytherin camp and most of the Gryffindor camp took a step back. Only Irina, Harry, Ron and Hermione approached the fence cautiously. Remember, the first thing you need to know about hippogriffs is that they are very proud, and hippogriffs can easily lose their temper. Don't humiliate it, otherwise you may lose your life. Hagrid's big face became serious, and he said solemnly, "You must wait for the hippogriff to act first. This is polite, understand?" Hagrid continued, "You walk towards it and bow. If it bows to you, you can touch it. If it doesn't bow, you should leave it quickly, because those claws can hurt people. Okay, who wants to go first?" Hagrid clapped his hands and looked at the little wizards. Hearing this, almost all the little wizards subconsciously took a step back, including Harry, Ron, and Hermione. Only Irina's eyes lit up, and she volunteered very actively. "I'll do it. Hagrid, let me do it." Chapter 184 Buckbeak and the Arrogant Malfoy. Hagrid was not surprised that Irina would volunteer. After all, he had seen Irina's performance in the small world inside Newt's box. "Come on, Irina. Show them how you deal with Buckbeak." Hagrid encouraged Irina. He took off the leather collar of one of the hippogriffs named Buckbeak and brought it to Irina. After studying with Newt Scamander during the summer vacation, Irina's knowledge of magical animals was not much weaker than Hagrid's. Therefore, Hagrid did not tell Irina too much about how to get along with the hippogriffs. Moreover, with Irina's magical animal affinity talent, even if Irina directly touched Buckbeak, I'm afraid the other party would accept her touch very docilely. Under the gaze of the Gryffindor lion cubs and the Slytherin snakes, Irina walked not far in front of Buckbeak. Buckbeak seemed very happy after discovering Irina's arrival. It shook its body a little restlessly, as if waiting for something. Irina's beautiful ice blue eyes stared at Buckbeak's big orange eyes, and she bent down slightly. Almost at the moment when Irina bowed, Buckbeak quickly bent its scaly front knees and made a very standard bowing posture. Seeing this, Irina smiled, walked up, and reached out to rub Buckbeak's head. Buckbeak closed his eyes and rubbed Irina with his head, looking like he was enjoying it. Buckbeak called softly, leaned down, and pushed Irina's calf with his back, as if he wanted Irina to ride on him. Before Hagrid could say anything to Irina, Irina turned over and rode on Buckbeak with great excitement. "Irina, you can let Buckbeak take you for a flight," Hagrid said happily. He was also very happy to see Irina and Buckbeak getting along so harmoniously. Hearing this, Irina waved happily to the little lions and snakes not far away, and then gently patted Buckbeak's head. Buckbeak immediately spread its 12-foot-long wings. After Irina held its head, it took off into the air and appeared 100 meters high in the air. Buckbeak called out excitedly, flew around the enclosure, and then reluctantly prepared to land. "Buckbeak, can you take me around Hogwarts Castle?" But at this moment, Irina leaned against Buckbeak's big ears and whispered. Hearing Irina's words, Buckbeak's eyes lit up immediately, and it flapped its wings vigorously again to make itself fly higher, and then it took Irina to fly towards the direction of Hogwarts Castle. In the paddock below, Harry and the others saw Buckbeak flying out of the paddock with Irina, and they couldn't help but worry about Irina's safety. Hagrid was also surprised when Buckbeak flew out of the paddock against his orders, but he was relieved when he saw Irina cheering on Buckbeak's back. He knew that, even if Buckbeak hurt himself, he couldn't hurt Irina, a cute little witch with a talent for affinity with magical animals. After about 10 minutes, Buckbeak finally landed in the paddock with Irina. Irina jumped off Buckbeak's back with reluctance. Although she still wanted to continue riding Buckbeak, she knew that she had to give other little wizards a chance. After all, this was Hagrid's care of magical creatures class, not her class alone. After seeing Irina return to the paddock safely, the other little wizards also became excited. Under safe conditions, who wouldn't want to fly in the sky on a ferocious magical animal like Buckbeak? Harry, Ron and Hermione walked up quickly. Harry chose Buckbeak, while Ron and Hermione found the other two hippogriffs. However, when everyone started to interact with these hippogriffs, they found that communicating with them was not as easy as Irina. Many young wizards were not recognized by the hippogriffs. No matter how unwilling they were, they could only retreat to the team and watch those young wizards who were recognized by the hippogriffs flying in the sky. Not long after, Harry flew back on Buckbeak. He waved to Irina happily. "How is it? It's fun to get along with these cute magical animals, right?" Irina asked with a smile. Hearing this, Harry scratched his head. He glanced at the hippogriff next to him, who looked a little ferocious. It was difficult for him to associate Buckbeak with cuteness. Finally, Harry nodded and said, "Well, it's really interesting to get along with these ferocious magical animals." While Irina and Harry were talking, Malfoy also walked up to Buckbeak. In Malfoy's opinion, if Harry could tame the hippogriff, then Malfoy could do it too. So, Malfoy bowed to Buckbeak and got a response from Buckbeak. Seeing this, Malfoy immediately became proud. He walked over and patted Buckbeak's beak, looking triumphantly in Harry's direction. "This is easy. I knew it would be like this a long time ago. Since Potter can do it, I dare say you are not dangerous at all, right, you ugly big beast." Malfoy, who was already a little proud, did not notice Buckbeak's gradually cold eyes, and he was still dragging his long voice to mock Harry. However, Irina, who had already looked over, noticed the change in Buckbeak's expression. Seeing that Buckbeak was about to swing his claws at Malfoy, Irina raised her wand without hesitation. Expelliarmus. A red light shot out at lightning speed and hit the unsuspecting Malfoy's back. Malfoy was thrown forward by the disarming spell, and this also caused Buckbeak's claws that were originally swinging on Malfoy's arm to only graze Malfoy's back, leaving 5 blood marks. Buckbeak was not relieved by Malfoy's insults, and he stuck his head out to bite Malfoy. But Irina stepped forward quickly and calmed Buckbeak down. At this time, the blood pouring out from Malfoy's back had dyed his wizard robe red. Malfoy kept wailing. The spoiled boy had never suffered such a grievance except for being beaten up by Irina in the 1st grade. "Please give me rewards and monthly tickets." Chapter 185 Irina, Furu's mother. While the 3rd-year Gryffindor and Slytherin were taking the care of magical creatures class, the 4th-year Gryffindor and Slytherin were attending Professor Lupin's defense against the dark arts class. In this defense against the dark arts class, Professor Lupin did not teach in the classroom, but took all the little wizards to the staff lounge. Today we have a practical class. Professor Lupin walked to the end of the staff lounge and turned around to say to everyone. Behind Professor Lupin, there was a very shabby looking cabinet that was constantly hitting the wall behind it, as if something was trapped in this shabby cabinet. Seeing this cabinet that was moving, Irving Fry, who was walking on the left side of Lin, asked, "Professor, what's in this cabinet?" All the little wizards in this staff lounge were 4th year wizards. Although they had 2 useless professors during this period, under the guidance of Professor Green in the first year and self-study in the next 2 years, they had more or less mastered some self-defense magic. Therefore, they were not afraid of the creature in the closet, but rather curious about what it was. Professor Lupin smiled, and he looked around at the little wizards of Gryffindor and Slytherin in the staff lounge, and his eyes finally stopped at Lin. "There is a boggart in the closet. So, can anyone tell me what a boggart is?" Seeing Professor Lupin looking at him, Lin smiled faintly and replied, "A boggart is a dark creature that will change into something that the person who sees it is afraid of. It likes dark and closed spaces, including closets, under beds, and even in some grandfather clocks. In addition, it has 2 shortcomings. That is, when many people appear in front of it, it will not know what to turn into, and it is afraid of laughter." Hearing Lin's answer, Professor Lupin's eyes flashed with surprise. Although boggart should be a dark creature that the 3rd year wizards should face, he was just giving these wizards who missed 2 years of defense against the dark arts knowledge a simple make-up lesson, but he did not expect Lin to be able to talk about boggart knowledge so comprehensively. It was as if Lin had really faced a boggart before. "Absolutely. Lin, can I call you that? You said it so well. You can even clearly describe some characteristics of boggart outside the textbook. For this, I want to give Slytherin 10 points." Professor Lupin said very happily. Lin's answer saved Professor Lupin the process of explaining the dark creature boggart to everyone. He directly introduced the spell that can restrain the dark creature boggart. Professor Lupin said lightly, "The spell to repel boggart is very simple, but it requires a strong willpower. You know, what really makes boggart completely finished is laughter. What you need is to force it to become an image that you find funny. Let's practice the spell without holding the wand first. Please read it with me. Funny funny." Professor Lupin read out the spell. That sounded a little funny in the most plain tone. However, no one thought that Professor Lupin was funny at this time. They all recited the spell seriously. "Funny, funny." Professor Lupin nodded with satisfaction. As expected of the little wizards in the 4th grade, their pronunciation was very standard, even if it was their first time to recite the spell. Professor Lupin cast his eyes on Lin again and said, "You go first, Lin." Lin walked forward and looked directly at the cabinet that was shaking constantly. After Lin walked in front of the cabinet, Professor Lupin led the other little wizards to retreat and make room for Lin. Then, Professor Lupin raised his wand, and a spark flew out and hit the handle of the cabinet. Then, the cabinet was opened, and a black shadow fell out of the cabinet and fell to the ground. Lin subconsciously took a step back and then looked at the figure lying on the ground vigilantly, but soon, he was stunned. A girl with snow white hair was lying on the ground in pain. Her wizard robe was stained with blood. There were dots of blood on her pretty face. Her ice blue eyes seemed to be filled with pain. The girl seemed to be suffering from some great pain. Her body twitched from time to time. The blood under her made her look very scary. The girl who appeared in front of Lin En was Irina, who was tortured by the Cruciatus curse in the Slytherin chamber that day. "Funny, funny." Lin En stammered, turned his head to prevent himself from seeing the scene he didn't want to see again. He raised his wand and chanted a spell. With a crisp sound, the blood on Irina who fell to the ground disappeared, and with a wave of magic, her ears turned into furry fox ears, and a big furry tail grew behind her. Not only that, Irina's hands seemed to be wearing furry gloves, and a long beard appeared on her face. She grew snow white hair, just like a snow fox in the snowy mountains. She was forced to raise her hands in front of her, making an expression that wanted to scare people. But now she doesn't look scary at all, but very cute. When Lin En saw Irina like this, he was stunned again. But the next moment, Lin En took out a camera from his pocket at lightning speed. quickly aimed at Irina, and pressed the shutter, and then quickly put it back into his pocket. Professor Lupin silently watched Lin En walk back to the team. He also recognized that the girl transformed by the boggart was the third-year little witch who fought side by side with Lin En on the train that day and summoned a complete version of the Patroness to drive away the Dementors. He didn't know what Lin En had experienced. What would scare him most was the girl lying in a pool of blood, but he understood that if Lin En didn't want to tell him, then he'd better not ask. Okay, next student, Irving Farley, come up. Professor Lupin looked at Irving next to Lin and said. Irving nodded humbly to Professor Lupin, then walked forward and faced the boggart. After discovering that the wizard standing in front of him had changed, the boggart changed again. Soon, a pattern of a poisonous snake spitting out of a skull's mouth appeared in front of Irving in the form of thick mist. This is clearly a dark mark. Chapter 186. I will do my best to prevent the tragedy from happening again. Funny. As the dark mark appeared, Irving waved his wand without hesitation and chanted the spell. Another crisp sound appeared, and the dark mark, which was originally flashing with a faint green light, suddenly turned into a pink snake-shaped marshmallow, which looked very funny. At this time, the other little wizards didn't feel anything when they saw the skull spitting out poisonous snakes. In their eyes, it was just an extremely ugly pattern. They were born in the era after Voldemort's fall and didn't understand the true meaning of the dark mark. Of course, some of the Slytherin little wizards had heard about the dark mark from their elders, but their cognition only stayed at what the dark mark was, and they had never seen the real dark mark. After all, after Voldemort's fall, releasing the dark mark was tantamount to telling the Ministry of Magic, "See, I'm a Death Eater, come and catch me." The elders of these pureblood families are not that stupid. However, Professor Lupin and Lin changed their expressions after seeing the dark mark. As mentioned before, when Irving Farley was born, Voldemort had already fallen. Under normal circumstances, he should not have had the opportunity to come into contact with something like the dark mark, let alone regarded as the most feared thing. Although Professor Lupin was full of doubts, he still had to continue the class. After he asked Irving to return to the team, he asked the other little wizards to come forward one by one to face the boggart alone. As time went by, all the little wizards in the staff lounge successfully repelled the boggart. This was not surprising. After all, the little wizards present were already 4th-year wizards. Their magic reserves had increased as they grew older. Some spells that they might not have been able to cast before were now easier to learn. What's more, dark creatures like boggarts were only teaching materials for the 3rd-year defense against the dark arts class for little wizards. After the last little wizard successfully repelled the boggart, Professor Lupin announced the end of the get out of class. After leaving the staff lounge, Lin turned his attention to Irving Farley, who was about to return to the Slytherin dormitory. Irving Farley was a young wizard from Slytherin whom he had known since his first year, and he had been his partner in potions and other courses that required cooperation. However, their friendship was limited to the classroom, and Lin had never known the private situation of this partner. Irving, can you tell me why the dark mark is your biggest fear? Lin stood in front of Irving and asked in an inquiring tone. Hearing this, Irving hesitated for a moment, but after thinking of Lin's record in the past 2 years, he let down his guard. Irving nodded slightly, looked around, and said, "Let's talk in the common room." So the two came to the Slytherin common room. The little snakes of Slytherin are always busy. They have paid a lot for fame and fortune. Even in their spare time, few people are willing to stay in the common room, not to mention that it is only a break time. When Lin and Irving came to the Slytherin common room, there was no one here except them. After making sure that there was no one else nearby, Irving told the story. In fact, when I was 10 years old, I broke into my father's study out of curiosity and accidentally saw the memory in the meditation basin placed in the study. So, Lin asked, "Does your fear of the dark mark come from the memory in the meditation basin?" Irving nodded and said, "Yes, although my father did not join the camp of the mysterious man, at his most glorious time, forcibly summoned the patriarchs of all pureblood families, except the families of the members of the Order of the Phoenix, and my father was among them. The mysterious man claimed that he wanted the patriarchs of the pureblood families to witness the Death Eater's actions of washing everything." Wash everything? I think it should be killing, right? Lin said lightly. Irving smiled bitterly and said, that's right. The cleansing that the you-know-who mentioned is killing. He forced the patriarchs of the pure-blood families to witness the Death Eaters breaking into the homes of muggle-born or half-blood wizards and killing them all. He called this brutal killing the cleansing of blood, and every time these Death Eaters killed a wizard family, they would release a dark mark hanging in the air at the spot. Lin sorted out the whole story and said, so, after your father returned, he put that unbearable memory into the pensieve, and you who barged in rashly watched it. Therefore, you who witnessed the killing regarded the dark mark as your own shadow? Irving said, yes, if it weren't for the fact that you and the little witch from Gryffindor forced back the you-know-who's remaining soul 2 years ago, I can be sure that you will never stand on the side of the you-know-who, otherwise I would never have told you these things. Obviously, Lin's glorious deeds in Hogwarts Castle over the past 2 years made Irving subconsciously think that Lin was a trustworthy person, which made him tell his privacy to the other party so unreservedly. Of course, it is not ruled out that Irving is young and immature and does not know how to hide secrets that may become a handle for others. Lin nodded slightly, and he was silent for a while, and said, you are so afraid of the dark mark, so let me ask you, if you are given a chance, are you willing to stand on the opposite side of him and deal with him with us? Hearing Lin's words, Irving was silent. In his previous generation, his father chose to protect himself when faced with the choice of camp and preserve the family's heritage. And what about him? Will he choose to protect himself like his father did back then? Exclamation mark. However, he really didn't want to see the scene in the pensieve again. Countless wizard families were broken because of the so-called blood cleansing of the mysterious man. Exclamation mark. Thinking of this, Irving's eyes gradually became firm. He looked directly at Lin En and said softly, if the rumored resurrection of the mysterious man really happens, then I will stand on the opposite side of the mysterious man in my own name. However, I will not drag down my family, so I will not use the power of any family to participate in this confrontation. That should not exist. I will use my own power to try my best to prevent the tragedy that happened in the meditation basin from happening again. Irving said in a sonorous and powerful voice. Please give me rewards and monthly tickets. Chapter 187 Unbreakable Vow. Lin En chuckled and said lightly, but, with your current strength, it would be very difficult to even kill a werewolf. How can you face Voldemort? Hearing this, Irving's expression dimmed for a moment, but soon, his black eyes brightened again. I will work hard to improve my magic level. Maybe I can't be as powerful as you, but I will never be a burden to you. Irving said so. Lin En laughed and said, but, some people can only achieve the other side that others can reach with a wave of their hands. However, the wizard's magic level does not represent all of him. Irving, what if I can make you stronger? Hearing Lin En's words, Irving was stunned. Irving asked, Lin, what do you mean? Lin smiled and said, you know, I'm an alchemist who learned from Wallace and Green. Perhaps you don't know that I have learned how to make the master's finished product, the Forbidden Magic Stone, last year. Irving exclaimed, Forbidden Magic Stone? Then can you use the power of this alchemical artifact to suppress the magic of the mysterious man? Lin smiled and said, that's nothing. The Forbidden Magic Stone is just a part of the great alchemy. Do you know that the equipment I made by myself can make a squib have the combat power comparable to that of an elite aura in a short period of time? Irving's surprise could no longer be expressed in words. He could hardly imagine what kind of artifact could make a squib who couldn't even use magic gain the combat power comparable to that of an elite aura. You know, an elite aura can fight against hundreds of ordinary adult wizards alone. So, what do I need to pay? I know that nothing good comes without a reason. Irving was not overwhelmed by the surprise in front of him. He said calmly. Seeing this, Lin En nodded with satisfaction. In the past 3 years of study, he had observed this little wizard who was in the same college as him, and was his partner in classes such as potions more than once. Whether it was the level of magic or the talent for magic, he could be said to be among the best among the little wizards of the same grade. Moreover, his efforts and character were enough to take on great responsibilities. In addition, in the conversation just now, Irwin expressed his determination to fight Voldemort, which made Lin En finally choose him. Lin En's voice became gentle, and he said, I need you to be my comrade in arms, my partner, and fight side by side with us in the future. Never give up, never betray. Lin En understood that he and Irina, two time travelers, could not match the power of a large number of Death Eaters in those pureblood families who agreed with Voldemort's pureblood philosophy. Even if he and Irina both had magic levels comparable to Dumbledore, it would be impossible, because what they wanted was to defeat Voldemort, not to destroy the magic world. After all, with the power behind those pureblood families, they can make the magic world regress hundreds of years, not to mention completely destroying it. Therefore, he must win over more comrades, preferably pureblood families who have the heart to resist Voldemort. Only by using pureblood to fight pureblood can the huge power behind both sides maintain a delicate balance and not let the entire magic world be buried with it. Winning over the majority, leaving a very small number, and defeating Voldemort's forces with the power of the masses is the best solution for the magic world. After learning that Lin wanted to win him over, Irving agreed without hesitation. Irving believed that Lin, who had once forced back Voldemort's remnant soul face to face, would definitely lead wizards to victory in the future. As for the savior Harry Potter, who was like a child, let him entertain himself with this empty title. I do, Lin, Irving said solemnly. Lin put away his cynical smile, looked at Irving with a serious look, and said lightly, do you dare to make an unbreakable oath with me? Irving chuckled and said, why not? Lin said, okay. But an unbreakable oath requires the presence of a witness. Come to me under the Homping Willow after curfew tonight. I think you should be able to sneak out of the castle after curfew. Irving nodded slightly and said, of course. If he couldn't even sneak out of Hogwarts castle after curfew, then there was no need for him to talk about going against the mysterious man. In a blink of an eye, time came to curfew time. After estimating the start of curfew, Irving Farley, who was originally lying on the bed in the Slytherin dormitory with his eyes closed, suddenly opened his eyes. He turned over and landed on the ground. After looking around to make sure that his roommates were asleep, he pulled out his wand and tapped it lightly on his head. It was as if a stream of ice-cold liquid flowed down from his head, and his figure also disappeared from the spot. This is the disillusionment charm. The door of the dormitory was quietly opened and closed again. 10 minutes later, outside the Hogwarts castle, under the Homping Willow, Lin and Irina stood here waiting. Lin had already told Irina about his plan to win over his comrades and his plan to make an unbreakable oath with Irving. And Irina also readily agreed to be a witness to the unbreakable oath between Lin and Irving. I'm here, Lin. Irving removed the disillusionment charm cast on himself and said to Lin, who was standing next to the Homping Willow. He was a little curious why they were clearly standing in the attack range of the Homping Willow, but the Homping Willow was like an ordinary willow tree, without any desire to attack. Lin walked up and held Irving's hand. Irina also came over and touched the wand tip to the holding hands of Lin and Irving. From the books on the 4th floor of the Owl Castle, Irina learned not only the knowledge of dark magic, but also some difficult contract magic and defensive magic. And the unbreakable oath is one of them. Irving Farley, after Voldemort is resurrected in the future, are you willing to raise the banner of resistance and stand on the opposite side of Voldemort forever? Lin looked into Irving's eyes calmly and asked. Irving nodded and said, I do. A thin, dazzling tongue of fire sprayed out from Irina's wand, like a red and hot metal wire, wrapped around the holding hands of Lin and Irving. Lin continued to ask, Irving Farley, are you willing to be our comrade in arms forever, no matter how the situation changes? Never give up, never betray. Chapter 188. The contract has been made, and those who break their promises must die. Hearing Lin's question, Irving's eyes moved slightly. You know, what Lin said, no matter how the situation changes, does not only refer to the change in the battle situation, but also more likely refers to the change in Lin's own position. In other words, if Irving agrees to Lin's request, then even if Lin wants to become the third Dark Lord in the future, and be the enemy of the entire magical world, he must follow Lin's footsteps, and be his eternal comrade in arms. Otherwise, once the unbreakable oath is violated, the only result is death. I do, Irving said softly. After thinking about countless possibilities, he still chose to believe in Lin. In other words, he chose to believe in himself and believe that he did not make a mistake. As Irving's voice fell, the second tongue of fire sprayed out from the top of Irina's wand, entwined with the first tongue of fire, forming a thin chain that flashed with golden red light. Lin asked, "Iwin Farley, are you willing to do your best to improve your strength and sacrifice everything in the possible war in the future?" Iwin said, "I'm willing." Under the hopping willow, the faces of the three people were illuminated by the third tongue of fire. The dazzling tongue of fire spewed out from the wand, intertwined with the previous two tongues of fire, and tightly wrapped around the two hands of Lin and Iwin, like a rope, like a snake spewing flames. "The contract is done, and those who break their promises shall die," Lin said, and he loosened his grip on Iwin's hand. After the two people's hands loosened, they could still see faint golden red lines flashing on their wrists. These golden red lines will not appear again under normal circumstances, unless someone violates the unbreakable oath. These golden red lines will turn into chains that claim their lives and wipe out those who break their promises. "Come with us, we will take you to a place," Lin said to Iwin, and he crawled into a hole next to the hopping willow. Seeing this, Irving discovered the entrance to the secret passage next to the hopping willow. After seeing Irina follow Lin into the secret passage, Irving entered without hesitation. After passing through a long secret passage, the three of them arrived at the Shrieking Shack. Is this the Shrieking Shack? Obviously, Irving was not unfamiliar with the Shrieking Shack. He had visited the Shrieking Shack when he visited Hogsmeade Village, and it turned out that the Shrieking Shack was not haunted as people said. Lin nodded, and he glanced at the claw marks on the surrounding walls and asked, "What can you see in this Shrieking Shack?" Irving hesitated and said, "If I'm not mistaken, these claw marks should all be from werewolves. And this Shrieking Shack is connected to Hogwarts." "Wait, Lin, are you saying that this werewolf is in Hogwarts?" "But this Shrieking Shack should have been built for decades." Irving showed an incredible look. Lin En said, "Perhaps it was left here by a werewolf who attended Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry decades ago on a full moon night. Let me remind you that the werewolf is still in Hogwarts Castle." Irving was even more unbelievable. "The werewolf is still in Hogwarts Castle?" Exclamation mark. "How is this possible? The Shrieking Shack has not been haunted for more than 10 years. If the werewolf is really still in Hogwarts Castle, then how did the werewolf spend the full moon nights of the past 10 years? Exclamation mark. Unless the werewolf left Hogwarts Castle more than 10 years ago and returned to the castle recently. Wait. Irving seemed to realize something. He thought of Professor Lupin, who was dressed in tattered clothes and looked pale. His pupils dilated. "Lin, you mean Professor Lupin?" At this time, Irina came over and said with a smile, "Yes, but don't worry, Professor Lupin is a good person." During the period of Voldemort's rampage, Professor Lupin was a member of the Order of the Phoenix founded by Dumbledore. He is in the same camp as us. Irving calmed down after hearing Irina's words. "But how do you know about the Order of the Phoenix?" Irving asked with some doubts. The elders of that year knew that Dumbledore founded the Order of the Phoenix during the period of Voldemort's rampage, but no one of the young wizards of this generation knew about this organization called the Order of the Phoenix. As for the reason, it was because the Order of the Phoenix had always been low-key, and after Voldemort's fall, Dumbledore disbanded the Order of the Phoenix on the spot. The reason why Irving was fortunate enough to know about the Order of the Phoenix was that he saw it in the pensieve. Lin said calmly, "My father was once a member of the Order of the Phoenix, but unfortunately he was killed by Voldemort." Hearing this, Irving was stunned for a moment and said, "Sorry, I don't know." Lin waved his hand, interrupted him, and said, "Well, we didn't ask you to come here today to talk about these things. Since you have joined us, you are our comrade and partner. I think I need to give you some self-defense items." Irving's eyes lit up, and he looked at Lin expectantly. Lin took out 5 things from the canvas bag that had been cast with the Traceless extension spell, and placed them on the table in front of Irving. "This is an all-chemical contact lens, which refers to the contact lens technology of muggles. After wearing this pair of all-chemical contact lenses, you can be immune to most of the black magic that is cast by gaze, including the Basilisk's instant death magic and petrification magic." Lin opened a small wooden box, revealing 2 small pieces of glass inside. Wow. Irving put on the alchemical contact lenses. He was amazed to feel the magic fluctuations from the alchemical contact lenses. Did you and Miss Lowell use this alchemical product to kill the basilisk last year? Irina smiled and said, yes. Also, you can just call me Irina from now on. Lin continued to introduce. These three are the alchemical pendant, alchemical ring and alchemical wristbands. They can all play a role in resisting offensive magic. Weaker magic can even be directly immune to it. In addition, they also have a certain resistance to dark magic that affects the soul, such as the Cruciatus curse, and weaken its damage to the host's soul. Irving put on these three alchemical products in amazement. This kind of alchemical product that can weaken the power of the three unforgivable curses is rare even in the entire magical world. After Irving put on these three alchemical products, Lin En smiled and placed the last stone tied with a golden rope in Irving's hand. He said lightly, then the last one, the magic forbidden stone. Please give me rewards and monthly tickets. Chapter 189 Animagus. This magic forbidden stone just lay quietly on the table, but Lin and Irving, who were only 1 meter away from it, did not feel any force that suppressed magic. In fact, the golden rope wrapped around the magic forbidden stone was called the golden binding rope, which could shield the power of any magic item bound by it, including the magic forbidden stone itself, which had the power to forbid magic, and the Horcrux containing soul fragments. Originally, Lin made this kind of golden binding rope, just to use the power of the golden binding rope, to shield the power of magic items and temporarily restrict the actions of the Horcrux when he encountered a Horcrux in the future and could not destroy it immediately in order to prevent the scene of Tom Riddle's disruption in the secret room from happening again. However, since the golden binding rope was a pure product of alchemy and its materials were not difficult to find, Lin not only kept some golden binding ropes for backup, but also made some more golden binding ropes to tie up the magic forbidden stones that had not yet been processed into magic forbidden scepters. If you encounter a powerful enemy whose magic level is far superior to yours, you can untie the rope on this magic forbidden stone and make the magic forbidden power of the magic forbidden stone take effect. It can indiscriminately weaken or even seal the magic power of all wizards around, giving you a glimmer of hope. Lin En said lightly. Irving took the magic forbidden stone as a treasure and said admiringly, is this the magic forbidden stone invented by Professor Green decades ago? Lin En added, yes, and after you untie this rope, don't throw it away. This rope is called the golden binding rope, which is also an alchemical item. Its function is to shield the power of other magic items. Hearing this, Irving was even more astonished. From Lin En's words, Irving analyzed a shocking fact. That is, the magic forbidden stone in front of him has not taken effect, not because the magic forbidden stone itself has not been activated, but because the golden binding rope has shielded its power. Even the magic forbidden stone with the power of magic forbidden can be shielded. How powerful must this golden binding rope be? Exclamation mark. This golden rope is definitely not an ordinary decoration. What is placed in front of Irving now is not one alchemical tool, but two alchemical tools. Thank you, Lin. Irving said sincerely. Lin smiled and said, no need to do that. From the moment you signed the unbreakable oath, you are my and Irina's comrade in arms. It is a duty to protect our comrades in arms. Irving felt warm in his heart. This unbreakable oath was not a contract for him, but a ticket to join a beautiful team. Lin asked, by the way, Iwin, you come from a pure blood family, have you ever learned black magic? Iwin answered honestly, I have learned some, but they are not powerful black magic, just simple black magic like the oolong out of the hole. Lin patted Iwin on the shoulder and said, it doesn't matter. For now, Hogwarts Castle is not as dangerous as you think. Next summer vacation, I will take you and Irina to another extremely dangerous place, so that you can temper yourself through endless battles. The extremely dangerous place that Lin mentioned was naturally the gathering place of black wizards in the French magic world, Lefebvre Alley. Only fighting is the best way to temper yourself. In Nocturne Alley, the largest gathering place of black wizards in the British magic world, not all people are evil black wizards. Many poor people will choose to live in Nocturne Alley. Lin and Irina will naturally not use Nocturne Alley as the place to fight. If they wantonly kill people in Nocturne Alley, then they will be no different from Death Eaters. But Lefebvre Alley is different. Everyone who can live in Lefebvre Valley is an unforgivable person. Killing these people is not a big psychological burden for them. After equipping Irving with all chemical tools, Lin let Irving return to Hogwarts Castle first. Irina was left behind by Lin. Lin, you kept me here. Is there anything else? Irina looked at Lin in confusion. Lin smiled slightly and said, Irina, are you going to learn Animagus? Hearing this, Irina was stunned. Animagus is a high-level transfiguration that can transform into a specific animal. Professor McGonagall is an Animagus in the form of a tabby cat. In addition, the 4 members of the Marauders of Harry's father's generation are Animagus, except Lupin, who is a werewolf. Under normal circumstances, every wizard who has practiced Animagus needs to register with the Ministry of Magic, otherwise he will be an illegal Animagus. If caught, he will even be imprisoned in Azkaban prison. However, if it is not necessary, few people would be willing to register their Animagus form at the Ministry of Magic at the cost of exposing their Animagus form and reducing one of their trump cards. Therefore, including Professor McGonagall, there were only 7 Animagus registered at the Ministry of Magic in the 20th century. I think learning Animagus is beneficial to us. We can have an extra trump card to save our lives, but learning Animagus seems to be very difficult. Irina said so. Lin said, in fact, I plan to practice Animagus this school year. I told you before that I joined Professor McGonagall's Transfiguration Club in my first year, and I have recorded the theoretical knowledge about Animagus. This is my Transfiguration notes. As he said, Lin handed Irina a yellowed and opened notebook. Irina looked down and saw that the page opened in the notebook recorded the method of becoming an Animagus. To become an Animagus, the wizard must keep a single leaf of the mandrake in his mouth from the first full moon to the second full moon. The wizard may not swallow the leaf or take it out of his mouth at any time. If the leaf leaves his mouth, the whole process must be started again. After that, the wizard needs to take out the leaf when the second full moon comes. Fill a crystal vial with his own saliva, soak the leaf in it, let it receive pure moonlight, and add a strand of the wizard's own hair and a silver teaspoon of dew to the crystal vial illuminated by the moonlight. The dew must be collected from a place without sunlight or human contact for 7 full days. Finally, the wizard needs to add a pupa of the grimace moth to the mixture and place the mixture in a quiet dark place until the next thunderstorm, and do not look at it or disturb it before then. At this point, it can only be regarded as the prerequisite for Animagus. While waiting for the storm to come, the wizard must do the following at every sunrise and sunset. Point the tip of the wand to the heart and chant the spell, Amato, Animo, Animato, Animagus. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 190 To Way Run. The wait for the storm may last 4 weeks, months or even years. During this time, the crystal vial must be completely undisturbed and out of contact with the sun, as sunlight pollution will cause the most severe mutations. In addition, as the wizard continues to repeat the spell at sunrise and sunset, there will come a time when the tip of the wand touches the chest, a second heartbeat will be felt. This second heartbeat may be stronger or weaker than the original heartbeat, depending on the Animagus form the wizard is about to transform into. When the second heartbeat occurs, there is no need to worry or panic. Everything must be done as usual without any changes. The spell must be recited the correct number of times, without missing any. At the moment, when the storm comes, and lightning breaks the sky, the wizard must immediately go to the place where he buried the crystal vial. If the wizard has completed all the above steps correctly, he will find a mouthful of blood red potion in the crystal vial. In this case, the wizard must immediately leave for a large and safe place to ensure that the transformation process will not attract attention or put his body in danger. Finally, the wizard needs to point the tip of his wand to his heart for the last time, recite the spell he recited at sunrise and sunset, and then drink the potion. If all goes well, the wizard will feel intense pain and 2 violent heartbeats, and the wizard's mind will appear in the creature he is about to transform into. In this case, the wizard must show no fear. After all, it is too late to escape the transformation he is supposed to have. The first transformation is usually quite uncomfortable and terrifying. The wizard's clothes and items such as glasses or jewelry will melt into the skin and turn into hair, scales or claws. However, do not resist, and do not panic, otherwise the animal's head may take over and drive you to do stupid things, or even completely replace your soul. After successfully transforming into an animagus, if you want to return to human form, you must imagine your human form as clearly as possible to complete the transformation. This is what Lin En's notebook records. Perhaps, the method of becoming an animagus recorded in Lin En's notebook is just like that, and it is hard to say how difficult it is. After all, the 3 unforgivable curses that can affect the wizard's mind and make the wizard fall into the abyss have been learned by Lin En and Irina, and what can an animagus, which does not affect the wizard's soul, count for? Exclamation mark. But in fact, the uncertainty in learning animagus is the biggest reason why wizards fail to practice animagus, and it is also the reason why there are so few animagus in the magic world. It is like the step of letting the crystal vial absorb the moonlight. If the night is cloudy, the wizard will have to find a new mandrake leaf and start over. Moreover, the cycle of practicing animagus is very long. If you are lucky, it may only take a few days, but if you are unlucky, it can be extended to several years. In such a long practice cycle, wizards are very likely to make mistakes accidentally, so that all their previous efforts will be wasted. How about it? Do you want to join me? Lin En stretched out his hand to Irina. Irina did not hesitate. She held Lin's hand and smiled. Of course, this is not difficult for us, right? Perhaps, animagus is an extremely difficult thing for those wizards who know nothing about it. After all, just waiting for the arrival of the storm in a place like Britain, where the rainy season is not very frequent, may be a long way off. But Lin and Irina are different. They have foresight about the original plot, and know that there will be a violent storm on the eve of the first Quidditch game after Halloween. Now there are only more than 2 months left before the storm, plus they need a month to hold a single leaf of mandrake in their mouths. Therefore, they really need to chant the spell every day and wait for the storm to come, which is only more than a month. In such a short time, the possibility of them making mistakes is very small. After getting Irina's answer, Lin showed a heartfelt smile. Lin took out 2 golden leaves and held one of them in his mouth. He held the leaf in his mouth and said in a somewhat unclear voice, "This is the old chemical prop I made. We can use it to simulate a single leaf of mandrake in advance. When we get used to holding the leaf in our mouth and can live normally, we will start practicing with a single leaf of real mandrake." As he said that, Lin handed another golden leaf to Irina, motioning her to hold it in her mouth. Irina nodded, and she took the golden leaf and held it in her mouth. To be honest, when they first held the golden leaf in their mouths, the foreign body sensation in their mouths made it almost impossible for them to communicate normally. But as time went by, Lin and Irina gradually got used to the feeling of the golden leaf in the air and were able to speak normally. Soon, 4 days passed, and this day was Irina's defense against the dark arts class. Professor Lupin followed the same method and took the 3rd-year Gryffindors and Slytherins to the staff lounge and took care of the troublesome peeves on the way. After teaching everyone how to deal with Boggart, Professor Lupin asked Neville to come up and try first. Then, the legendary scene appeared again. After Neville almost screamed out the funny spell, the Boggart that had turned into Professor Snape suddenly changed. Professor Snape's steps began to stagger, and his big bat-like black wizard robe turned into a lace-embroidered skirt. He wore a tall witch hat on his head, and held a big red handbag in his hand. This is exactly the Professor Snape who looks like an old lady. Seeing this scene, Irina almost did not hesitate to take out a camera of the same model as Lin from her pocket, and pressed the shutter at the old lady version of Professor Snape in front of Neville. The actions of the two were almost carved out of the same mold. After Neville, Professor Lupin asked the little wizards to come up one by one to try to deal with the Boggart. Soon, it was Irina's turn. After Irina came forward, the Boggart suddenly changed, and a black shadow fell to the ground. Irina looked down, and she froze in place. She covered her mouth with her hands, and her body trembled slightly. There was a boy's body lying on the ground. The boy had dark red hair that looked like it was dyed, and his dark red eyes looked empty. There were 2 black blood holes on his neck, as if they were pierced by the fangs of some snake. Obviously, the boy lying on the ground was Lin En, who was almost killed by the basilisk half a year ago. In the thing that Irina was most afraid of presented by the boggart, Lin En, who was transformed by the boggart, had been bitten to death by the basilisk. What Irina was afraid of was Lin En's death. Seeing this, Professor Lupin, who was not far away, had a complicated expression. The thing that this girl named Irina and Lin En were most afraid of was the death of each other. Obviously, this was not a one-way fear, but a two-way rush. Please give me rewards and monthly tickets. Chapter 191. The couple has a good understanding. Looking at the body of the boy not far away, Irina subconsciously took 2 steps back, somewhat at a loss. But soon, she firmed her eyes, waved the magic wand in her hand, and whispered, "Funny, funny." A crisp sound rang out, and the body of Lin on the ground disappeared, replaced by a wolf-eared boy with a long furry tail, furry wolf ears on his head, and unusually long nails on his hands. After seeing this scene, Irina's worries suddenly disappeared, and she quickly took out the camera again, and pressed the shutter at the wolf-eared boy in front of her. After taking the photo, Irina hid the camera back into her school bag so fast that it almost left her as a dual image. However, the scene of Irina secretly taking pictures still fell into Professor Lupin's eyes. Looking at this familiar scene, the corners of Professor Lupin's mouth twitched slightly. If he was not a teacher, it would be inappropriate to say such words. Otherwise he would have said to the two, "The young couple is quite tacit!" Irina was the second to last young wizard in the staff room to face the Dementors, and the last one to face the Dementors was Harry. However, before the boggart changed into the appearance that Harry was afraid of, Professor Lupin dodged sideways and used a spell to force the boggart back, locking it back in the cabinet. Harry was a little disappointed that he didn't get a chance to practice. Perhaps Professor Lupin is worried that what you are most afraid of is Voldemort. After all, Voldemort should not be seen by us young wizards at present. Irina comforted him. Time came to the weekend. In this week's practice, Lin and Irina have been able to talk, eat, wash and chant normally with the golden leaves in their mouths. Holding the leaves in their mouths has almost no effect on their lives. "Lin, I got the single leaves of the mandrake we need to practice animagus." Irina carefully took out 2 single leaves of the mandrake, which she asked Professor Sprout for yesterday. Lin En took one of the leaves and said with a smile, "It just so happens that today is a full moon. We will start to hold a single leaf of mandrake from today, and we can take it out after the next full moon." After saying that, Lin En put the single leaf of mandrake into his mouth. Instantly, a strong bitter feeling came into his mouth. This bitter and irritating taste almost made Lin En spit it out directly. After forcibly suppressing the urge to spit out the leaf, Lin En's face was already wearing a mask of pain. Irina on the opposite side was in a similar situation. The bitter taste of mandrake made Irina's facial features almost twisted together. After a long time, the two of them recovered. "This single leaf of mandrake is really," Irina said in a difficult way. Lin En shrugged his shoulders, indicating that he didn't want to talk. Even holding a single leaf of mandrake in his mouth for a while was uncomfortable enough for him. You can imagine how painful his life will be in the next month. Apart from anything else, at least he has lost his sense of taste. It was okay for Lin, but losing his sense of taste was a very sad thing for Irina, who loved food. Fortunately, the two had practiced with alchemy leaves for a while in the previous few days. Otherwise, under the dual effects of the foreign body feeling and bitterness in their mouths, they had no doubt whether they could speak normally the next day. "When I think about having to hold it in my mouth for the next month, I suddenly feel hopeless in life," Irina said sadly. The next morning, when Lin was about to go to Hogsmeade Village through the secret passage to buy a batch of alchemy materials, Irving stopped him with a strange look. "Lin, Professor Dumbledore wants to see you," Irving said to Lin. Hearing this, Lin was stunned. "Dumbledore is looking for him?" Could it be that his formation of a small group and his attempt to win over Irving were discovered? But it shouldn't be. Not to mention that their purpose is to deal with Voldemort. They haven't done anything in the past few days. Dumbledore can't look for him for this matter. But what else could it be? Lin En went to the headmaster's office in confusion. When he arrived at the door of the headmaster's office, before Lin En took out the list to get the password, the stone statue took the initiative to make way for Lin En to enter Dumbledore's headmaster's office. "Is this the gifted Slytherin wizard you mentioned, Albus?" At this time, the portraits of the headmasters of all generations on the wall of the headmaster's office were still awake, and the headmaster Phineas Nigellus Black, who was known as the most unpopular headmaster, was looking at Lin En curiously. During the tenure of Phineas Black, the former headmaster of Hogwarts, he was known as the most unpopular headmaster because of his strict school rules. Many young wizards hated this headmaster Black. However, the little wizard of Slytherin was an exception. Just like Professor Severus Snape, Phineas Black also favors Slytherin very much. Therefore, when Phineas Black learned from Dumbledore that there was a talented little wizard named Lin in Slytherin, his curiosity was aroused. "Yes, Phineas, his name is Lin," Dumbledore said happily behind the headmaster's desk. After seeing the portraits around him curiously looking at him, Lin immediately bowed and saluted. "Lin greets all the headmasters." Phineas Black laughed and said, well, you are worthy of being a little wizard in Slytherin, you know etiquette." After saluting all the former headmasters, Lin looked at Dumbledore with some doubts and asked, "Professor Dumbledore, I wonder why you called me here?" Judging from the attitudes of the portraits of the former headmasters around him, and Dumbledore's cheerful expression, Dumbledore's search for him should not be a matter of forming a small group by himself. Otherwise, Dumbledore's attitude should be serious, not so light-hearted. Sure enough, Dumbledore smiled and said to Lin En, "Lin En, at the end of last school year, I rejected your request to learn the fiery blaze. I thought about it carefully later, and felt that I was too arbitrary. It seems that I really thought too much." Thinking so, Lin En asked, "Professor, do you mean that you are going to teach me the fiery blaze?" Although Lin En has already learned the fiery blaze, if Dumbledore is willing to teach him, he would still be happy. After all, the power of the magic spell Vulcan opening the way evolved from Dumbledore's fiery blaze is very strong. Dumbledore shook his head and said, "No, I said that as a professor at Hogwarts, I will never teach my students the dark magic. However, I also recognize that you need the ability to protect yourself and the people around you. Therefore, I plan to teach you a kind of magic that is not weaker than the fiery blaze and can destroy Horcruxes." Chapter 192 Goblet Fairy Fire. Dumbledore did not regret rejecting Lin's request to learn the fiery curse, but Lin's words that day also touched him. Yes, they can't wait until tragedy happens every time to regret it. Since Lin needs a sword that can kill powerful enemies, why not give it to him? Exclamation mark. Besides, a powerful sword has never been exclusive to black magic. Professor, I wonder what kind of magic you are talking about that is not weaker than the fiery curse and can destroy Horcruxes? Lin asked earnestly. It's never a bad thing to learn more useful magic, not to mention that it is the magic taught by Dumbledore himself. How powerful can it be? Exclamation mark. Dumbledore said lightly, the magic I'm going to teach you is also a kind of fire magic that fits your talent. It is called Goblet Fairy Fire. Hearing this, Lin's mind was shocked. Goblet fire, also called the eternal fire, is different from the fiendish fire that devours everything and turns it into its own fuel. It does not need any fuel and can burn forever. The temperature of the naturally born goblet fire is not higher than that of ordinary flames. Its only function is to illuminate a corner of the world forever and never extinguish. But the goblet fire summoned by the wizard is different. The temperature of the goblet fire released by the wizard will change according to the magic power injected by the wizard, and the goblet fire with the extreme temperature can directly destroy the Horcrux. In this case, the goblet fire with the extreme temperature can also burn forever like other goblet fires. Goblet fire, the eternal fire, this is its power. Of course, Dumbledore is willing to teach the goblet fire to Lin, not because of how powerful it is, but because it is not black magic, but a real white magic. At this time, someone will ask, since Goblet Fairy Fire has such and such advantages, then it must have its own shortcomings. After all, everything is not perfect, and Goblet Fairy Fire is no exception. There is no doubt that Goblet Fairy Fire also has its own shortcomings. That is, it cannot be controlled by wizards. Even if it is a fierce fire that will backfire on the host after it is released, it can still be suppressed by the wizard who released it with powerful magic and used for it. But Goblet Fairy Fire is different. Once it is released, it will burn forever in the same place. No matter how the wizard drives it, it cannot move or extinguish it. The only way for wizards to take away Goblet Fairy Fire is to use a special box made by alchemists. That special box can cheat Goblet Fairy Fire, making Goblet Fairy Fire think that the special box is the origin of their coordinates and stay in the special box forever and be taken away by wizards. Dumbledore wanted to teach Lin En the Goblet Fire, and he might have tried to test how strong Lin En's affinity for fire was, and whether he could control the composition of Goblet Fire, a fire that the world could not control. After hearing the term Goblet Fire, Lin En said without hesitation, "Please teach me, Professor. You know, Goblet Fire is not only a powerful flame, it is also an alternative endless energy source. The eternally burning flame means that it can provide a constant supply of energy. This kind of miraculous flame is probably only in this magical world." Dumbledore pulled out his wand, and he recited obscure syllables. After a few breaths, a ball of golden flame appeared on the top of Dumbledore's wand. Obviously, this golden flame is the rumored Goblet Fire. Dumbledore raised his left hand and gently held the ball of Goblet Fire in his palm. As Dumbledore raised his hand, the sharp-eyed Lin En saw hundreds of different alchemy arrays flashing in his palm. Obviously, the reason why Dumbledore was able to hold up the immovable Goblet Fire was because he engraved the alchemy array required to make a special box on his palm in an instant, so that his palm had the ability to transfer the Goblet Fire. Lin En was not surprised by this. After all, Dumbledore himself was also a knowledgeable alchemist. Don't forget that the record of Dumbledore on the chocolate frog card clearly stated that Dumbledore and Nicholas Flamel had cooperated in alchemy. Being able to cooperate with Nicholas Flamel, who is known as the most powerful alchemist in the world, Dumbledore's alchemy level is not the second in the world, but at least it can be ranked in the first echelon. "This is the Goblet Fire," Dumbledore said gently. "Try to feel it." As he spoke, Dumbledore handed the Goblet Fire in his hand to Lin. Dumbledore did not inject much magic power when releasing the Goblet Fire, so the temperature of the Goblet Fire was equivalent to the temperature of the magic flame summoned by the blazing spell flame. Even if Lin's fire affinity talent could not take effect, this ball of Goblet Fire would not hurt him. Hearing Dumbledore's words, Lin nodded slightly, walked forward, and reached out to the Goblet Fire in Dumbledore's left palm. After approaching this ball of Goblet Fire, Lin felt a kind of intimacy spread throughout his body. The ball of Goblet Fire kept sending a warm feeling to him, making Lin unconsciously want to get closer to it. Soon, Lin's hands had completely reached into the ball of Goblet Fire. The golden Goblet Fire gently licked Lin En's palm, just like a newborn baby conveying its attachment to its mother. Lin En slowly raised his hands, and at this moment, a miracle happened. This ball of Goblet Fire that could not be controlled by wizards was lifted up by Lin En's hands, which were folded into a ball shape, and was slowly lifted up in his palms, and separated from Dumbledore's palm. You know, at this moment, Lin En did not use the alchemy array to cheat the Goblet Fire. "I didn't expect that your affinity for fire could even allow you to control the existence of Goblet Fire, which is known as the Eternal Fire," Dumbledore exclaimed. Lin En held the ball of Goblet Fire in his hand with some reluctance to let it go. Although he had not yet learned the magic of releasing the Goblet Fire, the Goblet Fire in his palm conveyed a message to him. That is, he could control the temperature of the Goblet Fire in his hand with his own will, and even extinguish the Eternal Fire. Please give me rewards and monthly tickets. Chapter 193 Eternity is a moment, and a moment is eternity. Lin En tried to control the Goblet Fire in his hand. Under the strong affinity of fire, the Goblet Fire in his hand was like an ordinary fire, and he could play with it at will. The Goblet Fire was pinched into various shapes in his hands, and its temperature fluctuated with the injection and withdrawal of Lin En's magic power. Unexpectedly, this Goblet Fire, that wizards could not control, could change at will according to Lin En's wishes. Since you can completely control this Goblet Fire, I'm relieved. Come on, I will teach you how to release the Goblet Fire. Dumbledore touched his beard and said to Lin En with a smile. Hearing this, Lin En nodded, and he put his hands together. The gubbly fire, which was called the eternal fire, was extinguished without any hindrance. Dumbledore taught the process of releasing the gubbly fire. Similar to the Patronus charm, wizards need to release the gubbly fire in addition to special spells and corresponding emotions. The emotions required for the gubblerite fire are eternity and protection. Only with the emotions of eternity and protection can the wizard successfully release the gubblerite fire that can burn forever. I understand the emotion of protection, but what does eternity mean? Lin asked, puzzled. Dumbledore said lightly, what is eternity? You should ask yourself this question, Lin. Everyone has a different eternity in their hearts. Lin said, I understand. So, Professor, what about you? What is your eternity? Hearing Lin's question, Dumbledore sighed and said softly, I think, for an old man like me, perhaps the law is eternity. Determination, courage, love and hatred will all deteriorate and distort in the long river of time. Only the law will never change. Therefore, I would like to take the law as my eternity and become the guardian of the law. Lin nodded as if he understood, and he lowered his head in thought. Suddenly, he raised his head, his piercing eyes staring directly into Dumbledore's azure eyes. Professor, I wonder if the law you are talking about refers to the law of change of all things in this world, or the law of the Ministry of Magic? Hearing this, Dumbledore was stunned. He found that he could not answer Lin's question for a while. Yes, what exactly is the law in his mind? Exclamation mark. He wanted to tell Lin that the law in his mind refers to the law of change of all things in the world, but he couldn't say it. After that incident that year, he had forgotten his ambitions. He yearned for the hard-won peace and stability. Perhaps the laws of the Ministry of Magic had loopholes or even stupidity, but he was willing to abide by them, because it can maintain today's peace and stability. Perhaps eternal stability is what he wants. Although Dumbledore did not speak, Lin obviously got the answer he wanted. Lin En just chuckled and said, in that case, Professor, I understand what eternity means in my heart. Unchanging and self-contained are not eternal. Only by running with the times and bringing beauty to the people can we be truly eternal. Eternity is also a moment, and a moment is also eternity. Eternity comes from people and is extinguished by people. I think that only by granting the people a dream can we achieve unchanging eternity. Lin En said lightly. As his voice fell, Dumbledore could feel a faint golden light lighting up around Lin En. It was the eternal power contained in the gubbly fairy fire, and it was also the power that made the gubbly fairy fire burn forever. Dumbledore looked at Lin En with a complicated expression. He suppressed the confusion in his heart and began to explain to Lin En the spell to release the gubbly fairy fire. Gubbly fairy fire is not a simple magic. It is much more difficult to release gubbly fairy fire than to release a complete Patronus. Lin En struggled to learn those obscure syllables, trying to remember them and then pronounce them clearly. Learning gubbly fairy fire is much more difficult than he imagined, and the difficulty is not in controlling gubbly fairy fire, but in how to summon it. Yes, summon. If the flames of the fire spell and the fierce fire spell are the result of condensing the surrounding magic power and attaching it to the wizard's emotions to release it, then gubbly fairy fire is a special flame that is summoned. Gubbly fairy fire seems to have never belonged to this world, but it is everywhere in this world. The eternal power that constantly condenses around Lin En does not give gubbly fairy fire a carrier, but is equivalent to a coordinate. To summon gubbly fairy fire, the sky turned from day to night. Lin En missed the lunch and dinner, and eagerly learned about gubbly fairy fire in the principal's office. Hard work pays off. Before the curfew came, Lin En finally succeeded in releasing a ball of gubbly fire. This golden flame curled up in Lin En's hand. With Lin En's generous injection of magic power, the temperature of this golden flame was equivalent to that of the fiendish fire. If Lin En threw this ball of gubbly fire onto the Horcrux, the high temperature carried by the gubbly fire could even destroy the evil soul in the Horcrux in an instant. After all, the gubbly fire contains the power of protection and eternity. This power is positive, and it is the natural opposite of the evil of the Horcrux. Lin En, your talent is really amazing. Dumbledore said with emotion. You know, even when he was learning the gubbly fire, it took him half a month to successfully release a small ball of gubbly fire. Moreover, he only released the gubbly fire. He could not play with the eternal fire of gubbly fire like Lin En did. Dumbledore looked at the gifted boy in front of him with a gentle gaze and said, "I think you should go back to bed, Lin. Curfew is almost here." Hearing this, Lin was stunned for a moment, and then he noticed the time on the clock. He bowed slightly to Dumbledore and said, "Well, good night, Professor." After that, Lin easily extinguished the Gobbler Fairy fire in his hand and slowly left the principal's office. After watching Lin leave, Dumbledore also fell into deep thought. From the recent two conversations, Lin's thoughts are very different from his own, but Dumbledore also understands that there is actually nothing wrong with Lin's ideas. Otherwise, after Lin expressed his views on eternity, he would not have radiated the golden power representing eternity. The difference between Lin and Dumbledore's thoughts may be that Lin's thoughts are more advanced or radical, while Dumbledore's thoughts are more conservative or outdated. It seems that I'm old, and the new era should be given to new people. Dumbledore smiled dryly and shook his head. Chapter 194 Full Moon and Halloween Eve. After that night, everything seemed to be on the right track. Lin En was like he had never been to the principal's office to see Dumbledore. He had never used the Gobbly fire in front of outsiders. However, Lin En's strength had improved a lot after the teaching that night. The strong and stable power of the Gobbly fire allowed Lin En to release it without distraction and control it. It can be said that the Gobbly fire is now equivalent to an excellent hands-off skill for Lin En. Soon, the time came to the next full moon. During this period, there were many storms in Hogwarts Castle. It was a pity that Lin En and Irina were still in the stage of holding a single leaf of mandrake in their mouths instead of burying the crystal vial, otherwise they might have practiced animagus. That night, Lin En and Irina came to the depths of the Forbidden Forest. At this time, the Forbidden Forest was silent, as if there were no other creatures alive around, except Lin En and Irina. But, the fact seemed to be true. I saw dozens of corpses of 8-eyed giant spiders lying not far behind the two of them, and the venom on these 8-eyed giant spiders had long been collected by Lin En. As early as the days before the full moon was about to come, Lin En explored the situation in the Forbidden Forest alone, and found this area. This area was originally a subclan driven out by the main group of 8-eyed giant spiders. There were no other magical animals nearby, so Lin En killed the 8-eyed giant spiders here, and occupied this area. There was no way. In order for him and Irina to successfully practice animagus, Lin En could only sacrifice these 8-eyed giant spiders. Moreover, as an alien invasive species, Lin En's killing of the 8-eyed giant spiders can be regarded as eliminating harm for the Forbidden Forest. Looking at the full moon hanging high in the sky, Lin En and Irina took out a single leaf of mandrake from their mouths at the same time. The single leaf of the mandrake that had been held in the mouth for a month looked much darker, but Lin En and Irina could sense a faint unknown magic power entwined with the single leaf of the mandrake. Then, the two of them simultaneously took out a small crystal medicine bottle filled with saliva from their pockets. The saliva in the small crystal medicine bottle was prepared in advance. After putting the single leaf of the mandrake into the small crystal medicine bottle, the two of them pulled out a strand of their own hair and stuffed it into their own small crystal medicine bottles. After doing this, Lin En took out another narrow-necked bottle from his pocket. This narrow-necked bottle contained about 2 teaspoons of dew collected from a place without sunlight or human contact for 7 days. Lin En poured half of the dew in the narrow-necked bottle into each of the 2 crystal medicine bottles, and then he put 2 pupae of the ghost-faced hawk moth into each of the 2 crystal medicine bottles. After putting the pupae of the ghost-faced hawk moth, the two of them were done. At this time, the crystal vials in their hands absorbed the moonlight from the sky and appeared to be shining. Lin En gently waved the magic wand in his hand, and a small pit appeared under the tree in front of the two people. The crystal vials in their hands staggered into the pit and were buried by Lin En. They were not worried that this would mix up their potions. After all, the two had put their names on their crystal vials with sticky notes before coming to the Forbidden Forest. After the crystal vials were buried, the two immediately stepped back. Guard safely. Protect everyone. Irina walked around the tree where the crystal vial was buried, muttering to herself. Lines of defensive magic were released, covering the area. Lin En waved his magic wand and drew golden threads on the ground. Countless golden threads intertwined with each other and turned into a defensive alchemy array. Under the effect of the alchemical array, wizards other than Lin En and Irina would think of the most urgent things when approaching this area, and then leave in a hurry. It can be said that the effect of this alchemical array is similar to the wizard version of the muggle repelling spell. After laying down this alchemical array, Lin En did not stop his actions, but walked into this defensive alchemical array, then squatted down, and engraved the second alchemical array on the filled earth pit. This alchemical array is not a defensive alchemical array, but a one-time offensive alchemical array. If a wizard can break through the defensive alchemical array with the power of the muggle repelling spell applied to the surrounding area, and walk into the array, the one-time offensive alchemical array on the surface of the earth pit will be triggered. After being triggered, the one-time offensive alchemical array will fire 10 shots of the Shen Feng Wuang stored by Lin En in 1 second to kill the wizard who broke into the alchemical array. With this double insurance, Lin believed that except for Dumbledore, no one in Hogwarts Castle could destroy the crystal vial that transformed them into animagus. After taking all the protective measures, Lin and Irina returned to the castle with ease. After a month of sucking on a single leaf of the extremely bitter mandrake, the two felt that everything they ate was delicious. Of course, except for the old jelly. Soon, Halloween Eve arrived. This day was also the first day for the third year, and above little wizards to go to Hogsmeade Village this semester. Ron and Hermione originally wanted to go to Hogsmeade Village with Harry, but unfortunately Harry failed to get the signature of the Dursleys, and could not go to Hogsmeade Village. So Ron and Hermione planned to invite Irina to go shopping with them, but Irina refused. As early as a week ago, she promised Lin to go to Hogsmeade Village to buy some materials, including food and toys for the little curled winged demon, the Blue Lady and Xiaobao, as well as Lin's alchemical materials. Since the fact that she raised the winged demon could not be exposed, and Ron was a big mouth who liked to show off everywhere, Irina did not ask these two good friends for help. However, before leaving, she left a map of Hogsmeade Village for Ron and Hermione, and marked the places worth visiting in Hogsmeade Village. This made the two feel much better. At noon, Lin and Irina had arrived at Hogsmeade Village. It was now the end of October, and the weather in Hogsmeade Village was not hot. Under the warm sunshine, the two walked hand in hand towards a meat shop hundreds of meters away. Not all shops in Hogsmeade Village only sell magical supplies. After all, wizards always have to have a place to buy the necessities of daily life, and those shops are concentrated in the southern part of Hogsmeade Village. Please give rewards and monthly tickets. Chapter 195 Waiting for Sirius. After arriving at the butcher shop, Irina bought 100 kilograms of brains of cattle and sheep, and then she bought 100 kilograms of earthworms at the materials store that Lin En was going to. Earthworms are also a kind of magical material in a broad sense, and they are the favorite food of botricles. Therefore, many wizards who raise botricles will choose to buy earthworms in material stores instead of pet stores. After all, it is well known that a bottle of water in a pet store costs dozens of copper nuts. 100 kilograms of food is enough for the little curled winged demon and the green girl to eat for several months. As for Xiaobao, the sniff is an omnivore. It can eat the food that Irina packed and brought back, and there is no need to buy food separately. After buying food for the magical animals for Irina, Lin En also bought a large number of alchemical materials. These alchemical materials are mainly used to refine special boxes that can carry the Goblet Fairy Fire. Yes, Lin En plans to make money by selling the Goblet Fairy Fire he summoned. Earning gold galleons by refining alchemical products still requires the cost of materials and a long refining time, while summoning Goblet Fairy Fire is just a matter of a little magic consumption for him who has a very high affinity for fire. As an eternal fire, Goblet Fairy Fire has a very high commercial value in the magic world. If Lin En wants to sell Goblet Fairy Fire in bulk, then a large number of containers that can carry Goblet Fairy Fire are naturally very necessary. At this time, someone will ask, since wizards can summon Goblet Fairy Fire themselves, why don't they summon Goblet Fairy Fire themselves, but spend a lot of money to buy it? Exclamation mark. In fact, the number of wizards who can summon Goblet Fairy Fire in the magic world is less than 1% of the wizards who can release a complete Patronus. Even if those powerful wizards can summon Goblet Fairy Fire, they have to pay a price to summon Goblet Fairy Fire, including the emotions and a lot of magic they inject into it. those emotions injected into it will be completely integrated into the goblet fairy fire and will not be returned to the wizard. The reason why Lin En was able to avoid these costs was ultimately due to his nearly invincible affinity for fire. Therefore, goblet fairy fire is still a very rare existence in the current magic world. In fact, as a descendant of a pure-blood family, Lin En did not need so much money, but since he had established a plan to win over the majority and establish a very small number of enemies against Voldemort, he needed enough capital to win over those people. Even if he used his own alchemical products to bribe the other party, the alchemical materials also have costs. With the foundation of the royal family, there is no problem in just supplying Lin En and the people around him, but if he wants to train a wizard army, it will be a bit stretched. After all, the foundation of the royal family was passed down from their ancestors, and most of the royal generations behind them were living off their wealth. I'm afraid that only every 7 or 8 generations will there be a capable royal who can contribute to the royal family. After buying the alchemical materials, Irina suggested going to Madame Puddifoot's tea house for some coffee. Lin had no objection, and the two of them went to Madame Puddifoot's tea house together. They didn't seem to notice that their natural movements of holding hands at this time were really no different from those couples kissing passionately next to them. After finding a good seat in the corner, Lin and Irina ordered a cup of cappuccino each as usual. Soon, the coffee was served. By the way, should we wait until the end of the school year and follow Harry and the others to meet Sirius, or find him in advance and let him cooperate with our actions? Irina said, holding her chin. Lin took a sip of coffee and said lightly, it's alright, but I still prefer to meet Sirius first, so as to prevent this unfavorable lamp from not only not cooperating, but also secretly interfering with our actions. In Lin's impression, Sirius Black, like Harry, is a reckless man who only knows how to rush forward and never considers the consequences of doing things. If someone tells him the pros and cons, it's fine, but if Sirius is left in the dark, it's really unpredictable what the other party will do. If Sirius accidentally breaks Lin's alchemical cage and lets Peter Pettigrew escape, then the plan Lin made before the beginning of the school year will probably go to waste. Yeah, I think so too. Irina nodded in agreement. But when should we go find him, and how should we find him? Hearing this, Lin chuckled and said, that's easy, today. Hearing Lin's words, Irina's eyes widened. She looked at him, waiting for his next words. Lin continued, don't forget, Sirius will break into the Gryffindor common room during the Halloween dinner, and today is Halloween. After Sirius escapes from Hogwarts Castle, the most likely route he will choose is the secret passage from the Homping Willow to the Shrieking Shack, and what we have to do is wait and see. What do you mean? Irina's eyes lit up. She seemed to understand Lin's thoughts. Lin smiled and said, we only need to wait in the Shrieking Shack one step ahead, and we can wait for Sirius. Therefore, we will not go back to attend the Halloween dinner later. We can just go to the Shrieking Shack and wait for him. Irina's expression suddenly froze, and she said stiffly, so, I can't have the Halloween dinner? Lin nodded regretfully, and then looked at her jokingly. That's right. Oh my god. Irina lay on the table between the two of them, feeling hopeless. After deciding on the action plan, Lin and Irina were in no hurry to go back. After drinking the coffee in his hand, Lin ordered some snacks and a cup of tea, and enjoyed them slowly with Irina. Soon, the sky gradually darkened, and the little wizards in Hogsmeade Village also went to the direction of Hogwarts Castle together. They didn't want to miss the annual Halloween dinner. After a while, Lin stood up and waved to Irina. Let's go. It's time to go to the Shrieking Shack, Lin said. Irina quickly put down the empty cup in her hand, stood up and followed Lin's footsteps. Lin's steps were very fast. In less than 10 minutes, the two had arrived at the Shrieking Shack. After entering the Shrieking Shack, Lin and Irina found signs of other people's lives here. Obviously, the person living in the Shrieking Shack was Sirius Black, who escaped from Azkaban prison. After scanning the area and confirming that there was no one else in the Shrieking Shack, Lin slowly exhaled a breath of foul air. It seemed that they were not too late. Chapter 196, Sirius with a smear on his face. Although in the original book, Harry and his friends found the damaged portrait of the fat lady when they returned to the Gryffindor common room after the Halloween dinner, this does not mean that Sirius Black broke in at that time. Sirius Black could have broken in at any time between the beginning of the Halloween dinner, when the little wizards gathered in the hall, and the end of the Halloween dinner. After all, when Harry and his friends found that the portrait of the fat lady was damaged, Sirius Black had already fled. However, Lin and Irina arrived not too late, but not too early either. Only 5 minutes after the two arrived here, Lin and Irina heard movement from the other side of the wooden door connecting the Shrieking Shack to the secret passage. Obviously, this is Sirius Black's return. Not long after, the wooden door was opened, and Sirius Black's vicissitudes, withered but handsome face in his youth appeared at the door. After discovering a little wizard and a little witch in the Shrieking Shack, Sirius Black was visibly stunned, and a look of panic flashed across his face. Although Sirius knew he was innocent, his wanted order was still posted on the Daily Prophet. Rather than letting himself be captured by these two little wizards who looked like Hogwarts students, and handed over to the Ministry of Magic, he might as well knock them out in advance and then escape. Unfortunately, the Shrieking Shack was probably no longer usable. Thinking of this, Sirius drew out his wand without hesitation and pointed it at the little witch who looked easier to deal with, Expelliarmus. Seeing a red light coming towards her, Irina dodged it by gently turning sideways. Seeing that there was a misunderstanding, Irina looked at Lin En for help. Feeling Irina's gaze, Lin En shrugged and said, "Since he wants to fight, then fight. He probably won't be able to listen to our explanation at this time. Let's slowly explain the situation after we subdue him." Hearing this, Irina nodded slightly, and her eyes became sharp. "Ice field," Irina shouted, and endless ice spread out in all directions with her body as the center. In just a moment, the entire Screaming Shack turned into a world of ice and snow. This didn't stop. Countless ice cones condensed out of thin air, and with Irina's hands waving, they shot towards Sirius with the force of thunder. At the same time as the ice cones appeared, there were also ice blades condensed in the cold wind, cutting towards Sirius together with a biting cold wind. Seeing Irina suddenly release such a powerful magic, Sirius immediately showed an incredible look. He even suspected that the little witch in front of him was a 100-year-old witch. The power of such a terrifying spell is not inferior to that of the elite auras of the Ministry of Magic. However, Sirius was not a pushover. Being able to join the Order of the Phoenix and serve it, Sirius's magic level was at least at the level of an elite aura. Although he had been imprisoned in Azkaban prison for many years, and had not used magic for a long time, which made his magic level regress a lot, his combat experience was still there. Facing countless ice cones and ice blades flying from inside and outside his vision, Sirius simply closed his eyes and used the magic power released outside his body to sense the threats around him. Sirius rolled sideways and jumped up to avoid most of the ice cones and some of the flying ice blades, and then waved his hand to cast a silent armor spell to block the remaining ice cones and ice blades from Irina. Although Irina's ice field was very powerful, her subsequent ice cones and ice blades were physical attacks and did not contain magical power. Therefore, Sirius's armor charm had almost no damage after blocking Irina's ice cone and ice blade. "Lin, you do it." Irina looked at Lin, who looked calm and composed, with some resentment. Lin smiled and said, "If you can't win, I will take action. This battle will be your experience." Unlike Lin, who fought in Levy Alley for half of the summer vacation, Irina had experienced very few battles, and those battles, except for those against Quirrell and the Basilisk, were almost all crushing scenes, which did not have any tempering effect on her. However, Sirius's magic level is not lower than Irina's now, and he has a higher combat awareness. He is an excellent sparring partner for Irina. And the most important thing is that Sirius, as Harry's godfather, will never kill a Hogwarts student. Even if Irina is alone here and there is no Lin to cover for her, Irina's life is safe. After getting Lin's answer, Irina also reacted. She no longer asked Lin for help, but devoted herself to the battle. Irina's right hand holding the wand shook lightly, and 3 red lights representing the disarming spell shot out one after another towards Sirius. Not only that, when Irina waved her left hand, 3 other freezing spells broke through the air towards Sirius, Sirius left side and Sirius right side, blocking the opponent's movement. Seeing this, Sirius, who was not far away, immediately broke into a cold sweat. Silent casting, silent and wandless casting, is this really something a little witch in school can do? Exclamation mark. You know, even Sirius himself only learned silent casting and simple wandless casting. As for silent and wandless casting, it was not a realm he could reach at all. Armor. Faced with the attacks that followed one after another, and his own movement being blocked, Sirius could only helplessly put on layers of armor spells for himself. If it was a dark wizard here, then the opponent would have used dark magic to break Irina's magic long ago. But Sirius, as a former member of the Order of the Phoenix, how could he cast dark magic on a Hogwarts student? Exclamation mark. Looking at the suppressed Sirius, Irina was not willing to give him up. This year, Irina was only a third-year little wizard. Her magic reserves were naturally not comparable to Sirius, an adult wizard. If she wanted to fight, she had no chance of winning. Therefore, she could only use her other abilities. Go, little curled winged demon. Just knock him out. Don't hurt him. Irina shouted. As her voice fell, something on her wrist that looked like a bracelet suddenly moved, and the bracelet broke away from her wrist and flew towards Sirius. When the little curled winged demon approached Sirius, it suddenly spread its wings, which were already 2 or 3 meters wide, and its entire body was stuck on Sirius' face. Sirius, who was not far away, only felt his eyes go black, and then he lost consciousness. Please give me rewards and monthly tickets. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 197. I hope you don't ruin our plan. When Sirius regained consciousness, he found himself lying on the sofa in the Shrieking Shack, and the little wizard and witch were nowhere to be seen. Sirius sat up quickly, wanting to escape before Lin and Irina came back. But at this moment, he suddenly found himself tied up by a golden rope, unable to leave the sofa at all. It seems that they are really students of Hogwarts, otherwise they would not know that it is not difficult for wizards who master wandless spells to deal with these ropes. Break into pieces. Sirius' mouth slightly raised, and he recited the spell of the cutting spell. But a second passed, and nothing happened. The smile on Sirius' face froze, and he felt that the magic power in his body seemed to be sealed by a supreme power, and he could not mobilize it at all. The golden ropes that bound his hands and feet were emitting a faint light at this time. The rope that bound Sirius was Lin's golden rope, and before tying Sirius up, Lin specially added many alchemical arrays with the power to bind magic. Therefore, Sirius, who was tied up by the golden rope, could not release magic at all. How is this possible? Sirius exclaimed. After feeling that his magic power was blocked, he remembered the famous French alchemist Wallace and Green who invented the magic blocking stone. However, even if this rope was an alchemical product made by Mr. Wallace and Green, the magic blocking stone was clearly in the shape of a stone. What kind of rope could seal his magic power? Exclamation mark. Sirius, who had never been exposed to alchemy, naturally would not understand. Perhaps the magic blocking stone made by the magic alchemy was in the form of a stone, but the alchemical array used by the array alchemy could be engraved on anything. At this moment, the wooden door of the Screaming Shack was opened again. Lin and Irina walked in, talking and laughing. After seeing Sirius wake up, Lin stopped smiling and said calmly, "Awake." Seeing the two coming, Sirius immediately showed a vigilant look. "Who are you?" If he believed that the two were students of Hogwarts before, he would not believe it now. After all, how could a 3rd or 4th grade wizard come up with such a thing? Exclamation mark. Lin chuckled, spread his hands, and showed the Slytherin College badge on his chest. "As you can see, we are all students of Hogwarts. Mr. Black, I'm sorry that we meet in this way, but I must make it clear that we have no ill intentions." Sirius stared at Lin and sneered. "Slytherin? Ha, you said you have no ill intentions, but I don't believe it. Don't forget, I'm still tied up by you." In Sirius's opinion, except for his comrade in arms Henry, there is no good thing among the wizards of Slytherin. Therefore, after learning that Lin was from Slytherin, he was unwilling to treat Lin well. Lin said lightly, "Mr. Black, I think you should know better than me why you were tied up." Sirius was choked for a moment, and then he remembered that it seemed that he was the one who attacked Lin and Irina at the beginning. Sirius stopped talking, shrugged his shoulders, and motioned Lin to continue. Lin sat down on the chair opposite Sirius, looking at Sirius, and said softly, "Maybe you don't know me, but I think you should know my father. Let me introduce myself. My name is Lin Rowe, the son of Henry Rowe, and a descendant of the Rowe family." Hearing Lin's words, Sirius suddenly became uneasy. He never thought that the boy in front of him was the child of his old comrade. Moreover, the other party was so outstanding. Although Lin had not taken action once in the previous battle, from Irina's attitude towards Lin, Sirius could be sure that Lin's strength was definitely better than Irina's. "Are you Henry's child?" Sirius' lips trembled slightly. He was very painful and regretful when Henry died. He did not expect that Henry would leave offspring before his death. Sirius looked at Lin's handsome face again. He inexplicably felt that he was very kind, as if he saw Henry when he was young. "Yes." Lin nodded slightly. He held Irina's hand and said, "In addition, her name is Irina Lowell. She comes from an ordinary family and is my partner." Sirius nodded to Irina. He had personally experienced Irina's strength. After Sirius calmed down, Lin waved his wand, and the golden rope wrapped around Sirius fell off automatically. "Perhaps I should call you Uncle Black." Lin said so, and he waved his wand again, and a table and 3 teacups appeared between the 3 of them. And the hot tea also appeared out of thin air. Sirius looked at the two with a complicated expression, and asked in confusion, "Lin, Irina, I think you should be waiting for me here on purpose. But you didn't hand me over to the Ministry of Magic, but I." Lin interrupted him, "We know that you are wronged, and we also know your purpose." Sirius was stunned. He wanted to say something, but Lin's next words made him freeze in place. "Peter Pettigrew." Lin said word by word. After speaking, Lin picked up the tea and took a sip. Irina continued what Lin En said. "We know that the mouse Scabbers beside Ron is the animagus form of Peter Pettigrew, and Peter Pettigrew has lived in the Weirlie family for more than 10 years in the form of mouse." Hearing this, Sirius' eyes turned red, and he said excitedly, "Since you all know, why don't you?" Lin En raised his hand to interrupt him again. Lin En said lightly, "We have taken action, and we came to see you this time, to prevent you from ruining our plan." Sirius was stunned. They were just 2nd and 4th grade wizards. What plans could they have? Exclamation mark. Sirius subconsciously wanted to refute Lin En's words. But after recalling Irina's powerful magic level and the golden ropes that bound him, Sirius immediately shut up. Chapter 198. Use your full strength. Perhaps they really have a good plan? Exclamation mark. "Tell me about your plan." Sirius said so. Sirius picked up the tea in front of him, drank it all, and then waited for Lin's next words. Seeing this, Lin smiled and said, "Before telling you about our plan, I have to explain something to you. In addition to being a wizard, I'm also an alchemist, and my apprentice is Wallace and Green, and the great alchemist Nicholas Flamel is my master." Hearing Lin's words, Sirius was suddenly a little surprised. If Lin is an alchemist, and his apprentice is the famous French alchemist Wallace and Green, then it is not difficult to understand why Lin can refine all chemical products with forbidden magic power. "Before the beginning of this school year, I refined an all-chemical cage." Lin told Sirius about his plan. After learning about Lin's plan, Sirius was silent, gradually disintegrating the wizard's body functions invisibly and eventually causing him to die in silence. "This method is really a little too vicious. We are worried that you will act on your own and destroy the alchemical cage that holds Peter Pettigrew, allowing him to escape. So we are waiting for you here today to see you." Lin said so. Sirius said with difficulty, "It seems that your plan is much better than mine, and it can even be called perfect. In this case, I will wait until the end of the school year to come." Lin smiled and shook his head, saying, "No, we need you to act according to your original plan, and the only thing you need to pay attention to is not to destroy the alchemical cage and let Peter Pettigrew go." Sirius nodded and said, "Okay, I understand. Since you already have a complete plan, then I will naturally cooperate with you. After all, it is all for revenge for James' family." After discussing the next action plan, the atmosphere in the Shrieking Shack also relaxed. The three of them drank tea and chatted. Irina's magic is so good, so Lin should be no worse, right? Sirius asked curiously, looking at Lin with an inquiring look. As Henry's comrade, he naturally hoped that his comrade's son would be as good as possible. Hearing this, Lin said cheerfully, "Shall we give it a try, Uncle Black?" Sirius hesitated for a moment, but still agreed. He was really curious about the magic level of this little wizard whom he could call his nephew. Lin smiled and said, "Okay, then please wait for me for a while, Uncle Black. I still need to make some preparations." Sirius had no objection, but he looked at Lin with some curiosity, wanting to see what he was going to do. Lin tapped his right arm with his wand, and the hidden power of the demon god showed its true form, and the crack in the middle also split open with Lin's control. Lin En took out a magic crystal whose light had dimmed from the groove in the middle of the demon god's authority, and then put another magic crystal with a deep and bright light into it. This magic crystal was a concentrated version of the magic crystal that Lin En had just tried to refine recently. Although this magic crystal was only a little darker in color than the magic crystal that Lin En had refined before, the magic power it could store was enough to support Lin En to operate the demon god's authority at full power for 5 minutes. After installing the new magic crystal, Lin En hid the demon god's authority on his arm again. He looked at Sirius and signaled him to take action first. Seeing Lin En being so arrogant, Sirius raised his eyebrows. He had never been exposed to alchemy, so he naturally didn't know what Lin En's intention was. He just felt that this comrade's child seemed a little arrogant. He was so arrogant in front of a wizard whose magic pen was comparable to that of an elite aura. "Disarm you." Sirius was not polite. He shook his wand slightly, and a beam of red light shot out in the direction of Lin. Lin slightly turned sideways to avoid the disarming spell, and the wand in his hand danced gracefully like a baton of an orchestra. The next moment, a ball of red and black fiend fire was thrown out from his wand, rushing towards Sirius with the momentum of devouring everything. Seeing this scene, Sirius suddenly broke out in a cold sweat. "Fiend fire?" Sirius exclaimed, and he immediately retreated backwards. Lin looked at him with a smile and said, "You saw your strength, Uncle Black. Don't worry about the dark magic and other means." Hearing this, Sirius's face sank. He didn't expect Lin to have such attainments in such a profound dark magic as fiend fire. "All curses are over." Sirius waved his wand and shouted. An invisible wave of magic spread out, forcing Lin's fiend fire back. While Sirius was forcing the fiend fire back with the curse of the end of all curses, Lin was also constantly waving his wand, and the golden threads in the sky intertwined with each other, turning into golden alchemical arrays around Lin. 3 alchemical arrays were created in just 2 minutes, surrounding Lin. The centers of the 3 alchemical arrays seemed to be shining with golden light, as if accumulating power. At this time, Sirius's curse of the end of all curses successfully extinguished the fiend fire that Lin had thrown out. Of course, this was also because Lin did not distract himself to control the fiend fire, but let it burn freely. Otherwise, with Lin's extremely high affinity for fire, the fiend fire he released would not be extinguished by a simple curse of the end of all curses. After extinguishing the fiend fire, Sirius decided not to hold back. Judging from the strength of the fiend fire that Lin had just released, if he did not use powerful black magic to fight it, he would probably have no chance of winning. Sirius shook his wrist continuously, and arc beams of light shot out in the direction of Lin. These dark beams of light emitted a faint curse power. However, it was too late for Sirius to make up his mind to use black magic. The alchemy array around Lin completed the energy storage, and in an instant, it burst out with golden beams all over the sky. In just 10 seconds, nearly 1,000 golden beams of light shot out in the direction of Sirius, while Sirius cast less than 10 black magics in total. Under this huge power contrast, the black magic released by Sirius was almost instantly annihilated by the golden beams that collided with it, and more golden beams continued to bombard Sirius' direction. Please give me rewards and monthly tickets. Chapter 199 Young people should exercise moderation. Looking at the golden beams that were shooting down like a meteor shower, Sirius looked desperate and fled in a panic. However, the shrieking shack was so small that no matter how hard Sirius tried to hide, he could not escape the attack range of the golden beams. Hundreds of golden beams bombarded Sirius' chest, knocking him back and hitting the wall of the Shrieking Shack. In an instant, the entire Shrieking Shack was shaken, and a lot of dust fell from the ceiling. At this time, Sirius' body slid down from the wall like a puddle of mud and collapsed on the ground, motionless. He seemed to doubt his life. Lin En pressed the wand in his hand downward, and the 3 alchemical arrays around him disappeared instantly. In fact, he had already held back in his attack just now. Although the scene of the golden beams in the sky was magnificent, the lethality contained in those golden beams had been stripped away by Lin En, and only part of the impact force was retained. Otherwise, Sirius would not have just been knocked flying and crashed into the wall like now, but would have been shot in the head by the golden beam like the giant 2 years ago, with his body full of holes. Ahem. Sirius coughed twice and stood up with his hands on the floor. He looked at the little wizard and witch in front of him, none of whom he could beat, and asked with some difficulty, "Are all little wizards so strong these days?" Hearing this, Lin and Irina looked at each other. In the end, Irina said innocently, "No, maybe we are just a little bit stronger." Lin walked up and helped Sirius, who was in pain, to sit on the sofa. "Uncle Black, this is for you. You can use it to contact us anytime in the future," Lin said, and he put a brand new two-way mirror in Sirius's hand. There are 2 buttons on this two-way mirror, which are connected to the two-way mirrors in Lin and Irina's hands. Sirius only needs to press the corresponding button and inject magic into the two-way mirror to get in touch with Lin or Irina. After learning how to use this two-way mirror, Sirius carefully put it away. After explaining everything, Lin and Irina should return to the castle. It has been 2 or 3 hours since the Halloween dinner. If Lin and Irina don't go back, I'm afraid the professors will think they are missing. Well, Uncle Black, let's go back to the castle first. If you need any supplies in the Shrieking Shack, just go to Hogsmeade to buy them. Lin said so, and he left another thing for Sirius. This thing is an alchemical mask that can simulate the appearance of others, which allows Sirius to go to Hogsmeade to buy daily necessities, after putting on the mask without worrying about being arrested by the Ministry of Magic. After doing all this, Lin and Irina said goodbye to Sirius and returned to Hogwarts Castle through the secret passage. After returning to the castle, the 2 met Professor McGonagall. "Mr. O, Miss Lovell, can you tell me why you didn't come back at the appointed time?" Professor McGonagall said seriously. God knows how anxious she was when she learned that Sirius had broken into Hogwarts Castle, and Lin and Irina, 2 extremely talented students, disappeared at the same time. She almost planned to notify Professor Dumbledore to thoroughly investigate the entire Hogwarts Castle and the surrounding areas of Hogwarts Castle. After all, if Lin and Irina, 2 gifted little wizards, were lost, it would definitely be a great loss to the magic world. Irina hesitated and lied that, "Professor, we just went to the Forbidden Forest to discuss magic. I don't know what happened in the castle." Hearing this, Professor McGonagall was stunned. "Go to the Forbidden Forest to discuss magic?" Exclamation mark. "What kind of magic needs to be discussed near the Forbidden Forest?" Exclamation mark. What's more, they were alone in such a quiet and deserted place. Thinking of this, even the usually serious Professor McGonagall showed a meaningful look. "Discuss magic. Don't leave the castle outside the specified time in the future. Even young people should know how to be moderate." After that, Professor McGonagall left. She did not deduct the 2 school points. She was quite tolerant of excellent young wizards. Looking at Professor McGonagall's leaving back, Lin and Irina looked at each other. Lin scratched his head. Did Professor McGonagall misunderstand something? Irina seemed to think of something. Her pretty face flushed slightly. It seemed so. The 2 walked towards the direction of the auditorium. Since Sirius broke into the Hogwarts Castle, the professors needed to search the entire castle to eliminate potential threats, so all the young wizards had to sleep in the auditorium today. Soon, Lin and Irina came to the auditorium. At this time, the 4 long tables in the hall had been moved to the side of the wall. Hundreds of soft purple sleeping bags were placed on the floor of the hall, and many young wizards had already crawled into the sleeping bags. Lin and Irina separated. Lin walked towards the area where the Slytherin wizards were, while Irina crawled into the sleeping bag next to Hermione and others. The lights in the hall had been turned off, but the young wizards in the hall were still chattering. They had many thoughts about what happened today. Irina, where have you been? Professor McGonagall has been looking for you. Seeing Irina coming, Hermione exclaimed, and she hurriedly asked in a low voice. Irina lied again and said, Lin and I were buying some things in Hogsmeade and lost track of time. Hearing Irina's words, Hermione's tone suddenly became strange. Buying things? What kind of things would take so long to buy that you haven't come back even after the Halloween party? You never miss such a feast. Could it be that? Hermione's eyes also became strange. Irina slapped her head and felt like crying, but had no tears. Yes, she was misunderstood again. Irina looked at Hermione, who was looking at her with inquiring eyes and the fire of gossip in her eyes, and she knew that she couldn't clear herself, even if she jumped into the Yellow River. So, she simply closed her eyes, ignored Hermione's words in her ear, and fell asleep directly. However, not all the little wizards in the hall had such a good sleep as her, especially after the wanted criminal Sirius Black broke into Hogwarts Castle. Most of the young wizards fell asleep around 3 in the morning, and some even stayed up all night until dawn. Chapter 200 Snow Wolf King, Lin En's animagus form. After Halloween, the Quidditch season is coming. The Quidditch teams of various colleges are preparing for the next Quidditch event. Soon, the time came to the day before the Quidditch game. On this day, the wind was howling, and the heavy rain covered the entire Hogwarts castle like the shadow of the end of the world, making the whole sky look very depressing. And on this day's defense against the dark arts class, when Harry, Ron and Hermione arrived at the defense against the dark arts classroom, they found that it was not Professor Lupin who was teaching the class today, but Professor Snape. As for Professor Lupin, after drinking the Wolfsbane potion, he hid in the Shrieking Shack. You know, today is not only a stormy weather, but also a full moon night. Who can tell me where Miss Lovell went? Professor Snape looked around the classroom and found that there seemed to be a little wizard missing in the classroom. This made his face darken. He never expected that Irina would skip his class. Perhaps she didn't know that she was the substitute teacher today, and she thought that she was skipping Lupin's damn werewolf class. Professor Snape thought so, and his mood calmed down a little. Hearing Professor Snape's words, Hermione also looked around nervously, and she realized that Irina was missing. Wait, I heard that Lin and Irina went out early this morning, and if Lin and Irina disappeared at the same time, could it be that they? Thinking of this, Hermione's face became strange, and the two of them were not the kind of people who skipped classes to fall in love. Because of Miss Lovell's absence, Gryffindor will deduct 20 points. Okay, let's go to class. Under the indignant eyes of the Gryffindor lions, Professor Snape said coldly. He waved his wand, and a PPT suddenly appeared on the blackboard of the classroom. This PPT records the knowledge points about werewolves. On the other side, deep in the Forbidden Forest, in an area where no magical animals live, Lin and Irina, who had disappeared for a long time, appeared here. This was the first stormy weather after Lin En and Irina buried the crystal vial. They came here naturally, to complete the last step of animagus and become animagus. Compared with improving their own magic ability, a defense against the dark arts class was really insignificant to them. Not to mention that Professor Snape was teaching the defense against the dark arts class, which was full of knowledge about werewolves that they had already known. Even if it was Professor Lupin's class, they would skip it in order to become animagus. Coming under the tree, where the crystal vial was buried before, Lin En waved his hand, and the alchemy circle that originally only protected the area where the crystal vial was located expanded in all directions, covering the location of the two people, and even covering the area of 10 meters centered on the two people. Irina also waved her wand quickly, chanting spells, and the various defensive magics she had previously cast also expanded in all directions, covering the area where they were. After completing these steps, Lin En raised his magic wand and dug out the two crystal vials buried in the soil, letting them fall into his and Irina's hands respectively. Looking at the blood red potion in his hand, Lin En looked at Irina and asked, "Who will go first?" Irina did not hesitate and said, "You go first, Lin En. I will protect you." Lin En nodded slightly. He took a step forward, pointed his magic wand at his heart, and chanted softly, "Amato, Animo, Animato, Animagus." After reciting the spell, Lin En raised his head and drank the blood red potion in the crystal vial. The moment the blood red potion entered his mouth, Lin En felt a pungent bloody taste explode in his mouth, and after the potion slid down Lin En's esophagus into his stomach, a more intense pain exploded in his body like a bomb. Endless pain almost blocked Lin En's perception. His vision seemed to have turned blood red. He half knelt on the ground with both hands clenched into fists, and his nails almost dug into his palms. Lin En gritted his teeth and endured the severe pain all over his body. Boom boom boom. Suddenly, a new heartbeat sounded in Lin En's heart. This was not Lin En's heartbeat, but another brand new heartbeat. This heartbeat made Lin En feel strange, but also made him feel a little familiar. At the same time, a blurred image appeared in Lin En's mind. Lin En looked hard, trying to see the figure that appeared in his mind. With Lin En's efforts, the figure gradually became clear. It was a wolf with fluffy snow white hair all over its body. It was a snow wolf, and its majestic posture and handsome face made people have no doubt that it was the wolf king of a snow wolf pack. At the same time as the figure of the snow wolf became clear, Lin En's body was also twisting and changing in the outside world. Lin En's body gradually expanded, snow white hair grew out of his skin, sharp claws like blades grew out of his hands and feet, and his face began to change. Irina, who was standing by, watched in amazement as Lin En's body gradually turned into a majestic snow wolf. Lin En's clothes turned into the lines on the snow wolf's body, and Lin En's wand fell to the ground. The first transformation of each animagus can only make their body and clothes change into the form of the target animal, and their wands will fall to the ground. However, when the wizards are proficient in the transformation of an animagus, they can even turn their wands into a line on their bodies, and go to various places with their wands in the form of an animagus. At this time, Lin En has completely completed the transformation. He feels his now majestic body, the hair on his body, makes him look majestic, and his strong muscles make him have no doubt that he can withstand dozens of coma spells without fainting. Although Lin En transformed into an ordinary animal, not a magical animal, the animagus form of the Snow Wolf King gave him a physical fitness far superior to many magical animals. For some reason, a desire to roar to the sky rose in Lin En's heart. He did not want to suppress this desire. After transforming into an animagus form, he raised his head and let out a long wolf howl. In an instant, a commotion came from the woods hundreds of meters away. It seemed that some weak animals were fleeing madly after hearing Lin En's roar. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.